morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this 7th edition of the Trieste Eastern Europe Investment Forum. Yes, we are at the 7th edition, and this year is a very, very particular year due to the, of course, to the consequences of the pandemic, but to the perspectives of the recovery also in Eastern Europe and in the Western Balkans. And so we are here today with a very, very strong program, very dense program. It will be a very long day, but very interesting one. And here we are. And so this forum is dedicated to this next generation Eastern Europe. And so this Trieste Investment Forum is strongly focused on the current situation and economic situation. So let me first of all thank all the participants, all the guests that will be with us today, and let me thank my colleagues and friends who are today with me on the stage and on the backstage. So first of all, let me introduce Federica Seganti. Federica Seganti, who is with us today, and Federica is the program director of the Master in Insurance and Risk Management of the MIB Trieste School of Management. The MIB Trieste School of Management is our traditional partner in organizing this international event. But let me give the floor also to Franco Del Neri, who is the authentic organizer of this very engaging and challenging initiative. So, Franco.
Thank you, Gianni. Thank you, Gianni, and thank you to everybody to be today here with us. This is the first time in our forum, Trieste Forum, that we introduce we start with the youth forum. We call this a Youth Forum on the Future of Eastern Europe, the Next Generation, and the Financial Communities for Eastern Europe. We have a direct connection with Trieste, where students from the MIB Trieste School of Management are in the work. So, few words about the youth generation. We should recognize that the difficulties and benefits of being young in today's difficult economic times, compared with us, their parents' generation, and about issues relating to anything, so housing, education, jobs, pension, environment. We have selected a certain number of young people from the Southeast Europe region through an independent survey. These people are with us today, and they will respond to the question, and they will be part of the discussion together with the two chairs from London, which are even young, exact part of the young generation. So I believe that is a good and encouraging example of the next generation. But let's move ahead, and let me throw the word to and to introduce the people from London. Tobias from. An associate in EBRD Capital Market Development Team and responsible for portfolio of transaction advisory and policy dialogue project in Eastern and Southeastern Europe. So I think is a perfect guy to have a dialogue with the panelists. And Tobias is a co-founder of EBRD's Young Professional Network. And the other chair will be Erika. She is a senior coordinator for the IISS Director General's Office and research analyst for the Conflict, Security and Development Program in London. I'm very proud because she was a stagiaire, Gianni, in your team.
She was more than a stagiaire. She's a FeBAF friend.
Okay, she's a FeBAF friend. And this is a community of ex-FeBAF interns. So, but let me immediately give the floor to Tobias, but just one welcome to our young people from the Southeast Europe. Dragi prijatelji, dobar dan svimi I dobrodošli. Rado mi je da vam vidi ovdje. Good work.
So this was a sort of a coup de théâtre with Franco's specific languages concerning Eastern Europe. Thanks, Franco.
Tobias, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gianni, and thank you very much, Franco, for this very, very warm introduction. My name is Tobias. As Franco said, I work for the EBRD. I work in the Capital Markets Development team, and I'm here today to host this event with my wonderful co-host, Erika Pepe. The Western Balkan countries are extremely close to the EBRD operations. For instance, Serbia is a recipient of more than 7 billion euros in investments. Bosnia, similarly, has received roughly 3 billion, which puts us very high in the list of EBRD's countries of operation. And in recent years, these investments are a reflection of the significant progress Western Balkan countries have made. Talking about the EU integration, the EU accession, talking about investments in fintech, investments in startups, and a more competitive economy in many, many countries in the Western Balkans. However, and unfortunately, many problems still remain. Be it the very high corruption, sovereign level, or in the private industry, be it an extremely weak rule of law in some of these countries, be it uncompetitive state-owned enterprises, which most of the time is a legacy of former political systems, and of course, be it the very high youth unemployment, which because of COVID peaked at 35% on average in the Western Balkan countries. And this, as Franco said, will be our topic today. We will be talking to young people from the region to understand what is their view on the different challenges and what is their view on the solutions to these very, very pertaining and long-lasting problems. In 2016, the European Union started an initiative to give the voice to young people. Today, we would like to follow up on this. We would like to hear the voice of young people. We would like to understand what do they think, what are their solutions. And with that, I would like to hand over to my co-host Erika to introduce our speakers and to say a few words about herself.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Tobias. And thank you, Gianni and Franco, for creating this opportunity for discussion. And welcome again to the Youth Forum of the Future of Eastern Europe. So my name is Erika Pepe. I am Senior Coordinator for Research and Analysis for Conflict, Security and Development at the International Institute for Strategic Studies in London. And as said, I am part of FeBAF's Friends. We have a great lineup of speakers today who have different backgrounds and experience and represent the next generation and the financial communities for Eastern Europe. And as Tobias mentioned, we're going to discuss with them about economic growth, European integration, and the challenges and the opportunities for the future of the region. We have with us today Slobodan.
Recording in progress.
Yes, okay. We have Slobodan Franeta, who is an economist from Montenegro and currently senior consultant at the FORFI, where he works for the implementation of decentralized financial solutions. We have Mihailo Gajic from Serbia. He's an economist research director at the free market think tank Libek, where he works in the field of economic freedoms, public finance, and business regulation. Ognjen Markovic is a political scientist from Montenegro, currently in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where he's project expert on the Western Balkans Youth Lab project, which is an EU-funded and regional cooperation council implemented project providing opportunities for youth in participate in decision-making. We have also Radislav Puric. He's an economist from Montenegro. He's an investor relation junior analyst at Georgetown SLL and responsible for institutional investors' analysis during financial communication campaigns. And last but not least, Edip Smolo from Bosnia and Herzegovina. He's an assistant professor and vice dean for scientific and research activities in the Faculty of Business and Administration of the International University of Sarajevo. Before we start with the discussion, just a couple of housekeeping points. So we encourage everyone to raise questions. So please write your question in your chat box, in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. And Tobias and I will pick on your questions during the Q&A. And since we have a very long and exciting day ahead, so apologies in advance if Tobias and I will need to be the timekeeper today. We have about 15 minutes for the discussion before we open the Q&A, around 10:30, 10:35, and we need to conclude at 11 sharp. So without further delay, I will give the floor to our speakers. So Tobias, let's start the discussion.
Awesome. Thank you very much. My first question would focus on the current economic challenges, or challenges to economic growth, as I would put it. Slobodan, given your experience and your background, why don't we start with you? What do you think are currently the biggest economic challenges to economic growth?
Thank you, Tobias. First of all, I would like to thank you, organizers, for putting young people in front of this conference. I think it is very important, especially for Eastern Europe and our Western Balkans region in these challenging times indeed. Well, I believe many of my fellow speakers will tackle some of the issues, but I would like to focus on two that are very dominant and I believe possess a biggest threat and challenge for the further development of Western Balkans region. One is, of course, crony economy, and it is concerning the role of, well, it is actually, it is concerning the relationship between business companies and ruling parties or government in some sort of shadow relationship. It is mostly visible in the construction business, and whether it is on the coastline of, for example, Montenegro, or whether it is on working on the highway, that is now very popular question in our country. So this is one of the question that one of the challenge that is possessing a lot of threat for the future development, not only in Montenegro, but the whole region as well. And it is something that is also visible in the newly published reports on corruption and how citizens of Western Balkan countries are perceiving corruption in public sector. Another challenge, of course, also that is afflicting economic freedoms. For example, in Montenegro, just in the last decade, Montenegro declined for 40 position on the economic freedom scale. So it is a significant threat also for investors and the people who are eager to start new business. Another threat that is also, I believe, or challenge that is also here present is trade barriers between countries in the Western Balkans region. According to the World Bank report, there is, I believe, 26 million hours spent on the crossings between countries in exporting goods. Hours, which is also, this is putting a lot of burden for companies in the region, but also it is slowing down investments and job creation of new jobs. Youth unemployment in the region is also something that is relating to this problem, and it is, especially in pre-pandemic time, it was very high in the region, ranging from 25% to 55%. So I believe those two challenges are something that are very crucial and that can be tackled, that should be tackled in the future by young people.
I agree. Yeah, definitely. Ognian, do you think corruption and the high burden of bureaucracy for companies are the biggest threats, or do you have more reasons or more challenges to add to it?
Maybe it's for Slobodan.
Hello.
Perfect.
I hope that now you can hear me well.
Yes.
much, Tobias. Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be today with you, and congratulations for the organizers for including young people in this year's edition of the forum. It's really a practice that we should all follow, and to include young people in discussions in all those areas that really do affect well-beings of youth from the region. Regarding your question, I mean, challenges to Southeastern Europe's economic growth are different, and even as Slobodan mentioned, starting with unemployment and different other things, I believe that lack of business-friendly environment in regard to your question, in regard to the quite long administrative procedures and similar, is something that we should focus on, as well as with the aim to increase the investments, both foreign and domestic ones. But on the other side, there should be a focus on generating more jobs and support to small and medium enterprises, to encourage youth entrepreneurs, but also to include all of those, not only young people, but all citizens when it comes to their vulnerability, meaning providing equal opportunities for persons with disabilities, Roma, but also additional support to women entrepreneurship as well. Thank you.
Yes, this is very true. Based on these answers, Mihailo, my question would be, could it be that the brain drain, that young people leave the Western Balkans is a direct result of this, or could it be that it has, different consequences or even different causes in this regard?
Thank you, Tobias. Well, we need to first acknowledge the fact that a human being is not just a homo economicus, it's also zone politikon. So one of the causes why people are emigrating for these countries are not due to only economic reasons. The level of salaries in the Western Balkans is significantly lower than Western countries. And since the geographical distance is not that big, people see it, people perceive it, and that's one of the main drivers of mass immigration from the countries in the region. However, in recent years, we have a rise of people who are emigrating from the region, not only because of the economic reasons. These are people who are high professionals in their areas of expertise. They have very high salaries in Serbia or Bosnia, Montenegro, for example. These are IT engineers, data scientists, etc. But they leave the region because of the unregulated or very bad environment in which they live. So there is the problem of the healthcare accessibility and the quality of care. There is also the problem of the way how the public services work. People are fed up with corruption, inefficient bureaucracy, and similar problems that are resulting from it. Also, one of the main detriments that this mass brain drain will have on the economies in the region is the lowering level of economic growth in the future. So not only that the ever-rising costs of social expenditure, for example, for the healthcare and the retiree benefits are going to increase, they will also fall on the payments of the ever lower number of people, the working age that remain in the region. Also, there is now already a problem in Serbia finding good skilled workers because most of them are, for example, in London or Munich.
So it's a little bit the chicken and the egg. Is it the people leaving? Is it the business environment, why people are leaving? And the business environment is because of people leaving. Yeah, very, very clear. Erica, would you like to follow up on this?
Yes, thank you, Tobias. So this was a very good overview of the main challenges to economic growth in the region. But let's now talk about European integration. Do you think that the integration process of Western Balkans into the European Union will increase its speed after the COVID-19 crisis? And what is, in your opinion, the role of the private sector in this integration process? So I would like to hear Agyan perspective that might be a more policy perspective first. I think you are still muted, Agyan. You cannot mute yourself. Okay. Can you please help Agyan to unmute? Okay, so Agyan is not unmuted.
Here I am.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Seems that I have some difficulties with technical agency. Maybe I would not like to hear, but yeah, thank you, Erika. Yes, EU integration process is something of, it's kind of an anchor for the Western Balkans region. And as you asked, I believe, is it going to speed? I'm not sure, but is it going to be maybe more challenging, especially now when we are all aware on the circumstances of the COVID-19? I'm quite sure. But on the other side, I believe that at this period, we should all focus on the essence of the very EU integration process, meaning that concrete developments, concrete reforms in regards to the first of all, rule of law, judiciary, legal adjustments, but also introducing different initiatives as per EU best practices to the region is crucial. Having in mind, first of all, financial crisis, and now we are all witnessing the new COVID-19 crisis that showed how vulnerable we are, but on the other side, how through cooperation among ourselves, we can really achieve many different, let's say, successful stories together. And in this regard, I would like to mention regional cooperation, first of all, having in mind that, for example, when it comes to regional cooperation and in general, average regional youth unemployment rate in 2020 was 35%, which is more than double than the European Union rate of 16.9%. On the other side, we are having 51% of young people who are worrying about employment. But in the same time, we are having young people from the region as the key supporters of the EU integration processes. And therefore, having in mind that youth constitutes more than 20% of the overall population, let's say in Western Balkans, I believe that should be the main reason to including young people in discussing all of the important topics and developments that are tackling their lives, having in mind that 20% of overall population is not something that we should forget, and definitely not speak about it as the future of the region, future of the Europe and similar, but rather focus as we as young people are also the present. In that regard, having in mind that through cooperation, I really believe we can solve many different things. I would like to stress Balkan Barometer, RCC's Commission annual public opinion poll, which states that 61% of youth aged 18-24 tend to agree that what brings Western Balkan citizens together is more important than what separates them. On the other side, 43% of this group would consider as a good thing having people from other parts of the region coming to live and work in their economies. And that is something that when it comes to EU integration process and is it going to speed up or not, we should think of and really utilize young people from the region, their innovative ideas, solutions, as someone mentioned earlier, I believe Slobodan, and really bring them to the table together with policymakers in order to maybe not achieve a faster EU integration process, but maybe to fulfill all of those obligations and criteria that we have to, but rather in essential way, and in that regard, having the essential participation of young people. Thanks, Erika.
Thank you very much again. This is very interesting, and I want to hear Edip's point of view because he might have a different view. So Adib, do you agree that reforms, regional cooperation, as well as involvement of young people are crucial for integration, as the audience suggested? And do you think the integration process is going to move forward?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here, and good morning to all of you. Now, I agree 100% with what was said by my colleague earlier. Indeed, if we involve the younger generation, younger population, and even if we involve the people in general, they would support integration 100%, I'm sure, given all these reasons that they mentioned earlier. However, we have to understand one thing, and that is that, you know, the integration, EU integration is the two-way street, i.e. we need support from the EU in the first place, as well as from the countries in Western Balkans. And I'm afraid that, you know, it is not quite clear if we have this kind of situation right now, if we have the right environment, both in EU and the Western Balkan. I mean, maybe some countries are pretty much in advance when it comes to the EU integration because they don't have that much complicated government and everything. But given the Bosnia that is lacking behind, you know, due to all these, you know, people that are in control and they are not doing their job as they should. In fact, what happens is that, you know, some of these, some of these people who are involved in EU integration or in general in coming up with the decisions are very much the first one that are, you know, going against any kind of proposal that are putting us in front or putting us on the track to the EU integration. So this is something that we need to work out, and I think that the best approach would be if we have some kind of you know, joint initiative by all countries, which would be, you know, supported, directed, you know, and controlled to some extent by the EU. Otherwise, you know, I'm afraid if we go case by case, that, you know, most of these countries will not be seeing, you know, EU integration in the next 10 years or even more. Maybe some of them, yes, but in general, let's say for the Bosnia, I don't see that it is going to happen at this you know, speed that we are currently developing that regard. However, when it comes to the private sector, I would say that the private sector is much better in a sense, and this is the reason, again, because the private sector has its own management that is not nationalist, that is not divided between ethnics, different ethnic groups, and they are making the progress much faster to the EU. And they are sometimes, you know, the engine of the change, that they are bringing the economic change of some rules and regulations that are helping them, you know, enter the EU market. So this is a positive sign. However, this is again limited because this is only available to some major sectors and big players in the market. So the overall situation is, I don't think that in the aftermath of the COVID-19 that will speed up in any way due to basically these things that are going on, the issues that are being raised in the EU in the first place, who are the holding basically the controls and everything, and besides, you know, because of the governments that we are having in this region.
Thank you very much, Edip, for raising these important points. I want to go to Mihailo because Edip said, of course, that EU integration is a two-way process. And so I wanted to ask Mihailo, if the integration process does not move forward, can you, what is in your view an alternative solution for growth in the region?
Well, I think that we need to stop thinking inside of the EU box and start thinking outside of it. So the European Union is not the only thing that promotes economic growth. However, the European Union is the, let's say, some kind of international organization which usually consists of countries that are business friendly, meaning regulation, have high economic freedoms and stable institutions, especially judiciary. So it's not bad to be a part of that club. However, if you want to be part of the European Union just because you want to be a part of it, not because you want to have the whole socio-economical system that is connected to it, then we have a big problem. I believe that the governments in the region are pretending to reform, and the European Union is pretending to believe them. So we don't have any significant reform aim, except maybe in Northern Macedonia for the time being, that is pushing on the European agenda, making countries in the region more palatable for the European taste, basically making our societies and countries better. So how to increase something that is, you know, not rising by itself, it's a big problem. I believe that if the countries in the region became more similar to Switzerland or Iceland, which are not members of the European Union, then basically the EU will want those countries in, and we won't be talking about EU as the only way of moving our societies forward. We need a local impetus, and that is something that we are lacking. One, because although the young people are more pro-EU oriented than the older ones, more than 50% of voters in each elections in the countries and the regions are older than 50. So basically you need to tackle the problem of the very old, ultra-conservative traditional societies in these countries. And also the political elite in these countries are not too keen on becoming a EU member, because that will cut off most of the lucrative businesses they have in the way that Slobodan Franeta spoke at the beginning of this conference.
Thank you very much, Mihailo, for highlighting the importance of demography when we think about European integration is an element that we should always consider. Tobias, back to you.
Yeah, thanks. I completely agree. The EU integration could be a big chance for the youth. However, it's very uncertain, and we're not sure how this develops in the next couple of years. However, one area which has been relatively close aligned to EU standards is, in some countries at least, the financial sector. And my next question would be twofold. On the one hand side, it would be, what potential does the financial sector have to perhaps, to a certain extent, stop the brain drain, to stop leaving, to stop young people from leaving the country? And on the other hand side, what role does the financial sector play in overcoming the COVID pandemic? How financial institutions managed to cope with it? And I would like to talk to Radislav about it first.
Okay, hello everyone. First of all, I want to thank all FeBAF members, and especially Franco Del Neri for the invitation. It is my big honor to represent the young generation of the Balkans and my country, Montenegro, in such an important event as the Trieste Eastern Europe Investment Forum for East and for all of us. In the reference to the question, as a response to the COVID crisis, we have witnessed a set of measures, both from government and financial market regulators. So the government has adopted a set of measures to target industries affected by the crisis, such as credit lines to support liquidity, financial aids, tax allowances, reduction or delays of custom duties, similar sets of measures in all the countries. The example in Montenegro, there is the Insurance Supervision Agency that has introduced a list of recommendations that provided insurers affected by the crisis. So to postpone or reschedule the insurance premium payments. So or obtain travel insurance premium refunds. The Central Bank of Montenegro has also introduced sets of measures that provided debtors with the right to a moratorium on loan repayments, as well as with loan restructuring options. So this need for digitalization has been recognized before the crisis, but has been put into scope during 2020 and has been strongly supported since. So hence, by the end of 2021, the amendments to the law on the prevention of money laundering and terrorist financing are expected to be adopted, which would provide persons to be identified by electronic certificates and or by video call without physical presence, so allowing owners easier communication with banks and other financial institutions. So this can help. This this is the way. So furthermore, the new payment system law is to be introduced and will fully transpose the EU directives on payment services and internal market in the legal system of Montenegro. I'm talking about Montenegro in this case. So the mention would enhance digitalization in terms of security and protection of payments, ease of transactions, and new types of payment methods. So mobile and internet payments, something that we have in these developed countries. It should be also mentioned that the process of digitalization relies on the new format of biometric IDs that were introduced in 2020. So these are a couple of pros that we have during this crisis. The need of digitalization is bigger, and we are really trying to make profit out of it.
And Radoslav, just to follow up on that quickly, digitalization in this, do you think it could be some sort of creator of let's say, or it could limit the youth unemployment in these regions? Could it be a sector that creates many more places for people to work, especially in the younger generation, if it would be invested heavily in it?
Yes, I completely agree. When we arrive at digitalization that is important in the whole world, I think that the countries from this area just need to follow the steps from these developed countries. Basically, we just need to copy and paste. That's my opinion. And that will enhance of course everything, and it will give the youth possibility to improve, because my opinion is that the young generation and the government actually can overcome this brain drain problem that was mentioned earlier by motivating us and assuring young people that are actually needed in the country of origin. So yeah, this is my opinion, and of course it is really important, and I really think that this can help in the future.
Yes. Slobodan, over to you. Do you think digitalization in particular is something each and every country should embrace to generate more jobs and to keep people in the country?
Well, yes, definitely. I saw some positive outcomes after the COVID-19 pandemic, in sense that private companies started finally to embrace digital solution and started implementing them and using them, and that led to engaging a lot of young minds in creating them and being involved in those companies. So this is a positive outlook that is a positive trend that I'm seeing. Of course, there is a lack of institutional support at this moment, and it is something that government officials should be focused on in the future to establish an ambient or where young people, especially those who are interested in developing technological improvements for private sector, could benefit and be and push this region to become a more innovative hub of Europe. There are a lot of challenges in this field, especially if we are, I can tell about two in Montenegro and Serbia, I believe. In Montenegro, one of the problems is the lack of access to financial services, international financial services, in the sense that people do not have any platform, especially small and medium enterprises, in which they can work with the world, but not using banks directly. For example, PayPal is not functioning in Montenegro. It is a big problem for several years. In Serbia, there was a problem, and I believe Mihailo can talk more about it, with freelancers, with governments wanting to retroactively tax freelancers, and some of the burdens that was imposed on these people are pretty high for what they are earning. So this is something that can be discouraging people of going into this field, and this is something that should find a lot of institutional support if we want to push more innovative solutions in private sector. So in general, I think this is something that can be beneficial for both private sector and government. And this is something that can bring, that can solve some of the problems we have in solving, for example, corruption, in sense that maybe we can start thinking about e-governments and how we can make data more transparent and accountable for public. So in that sense, I believe COVID-19 pandemic push these topics in front of a discussion, at least among people who are in private sector.
Slobodan, just to quickly follow up on that, because your point on taxation actually is very, very interesting. To be able to invest in digitalization and to, you know, embrace this transformation, a lot of investments need to be made, and this money has to come from somewhere. Obviously, if the taxation burden is too high, it backfires. But have you seen any changes in the investment climate due to COVID-19, or is it as pre-COVID, let's say?
Well, my opinion is that there wasn't a lot of change because of COVID-19 pandemic, but mostly because of political events in the region, because I believe at this point political turbulences are something that are causing changes in investment climate in negative way. So this is something that is now also very problematic, because it is starting to reignite some old problems that could move the region in backward instead of moving forward.
Interesting. I guess, Erica, you have another very interesting question, so I'll hand over to you.
Yes, thank you, Tobias. So we discussed the challenges of fragmentation, institutional flows, corruption, brain drain, and employment, and access to capital, of course. But as you all are part of the next generation of Eastern European, I would like to hear your thoughts, 2 minutes each, and I will start with Slobodan, on how you think you can contribute to a healthier, greener, more digital, and inclusive society for Eastern Europe. Slobodan, you go first. Mihailo is the second.
Thank you. Well, in general, what I'm trying to do is to focus more on digital, green and sustainable businesses, and to promote something that can be done through blockchain technology, which I believe can accelerate development of not only financial sector in the Western Balkans region, but in general in the whole world. I believe there is a great use of blockchain technology in many areas that can be very, very good implementation and can move private companies forward. So in general, that is something that I believe we should focus, although I understand it is very challenging for this region at this point to think about it. But in general, I think the region should become something more of early adopter in new technologies if we want to push it forward, and if we want to bring young people, if that is intention, to bring young people home so they can further contribute to the regional growth and prosperity.
Thank you. And how would you increase the awareness of the benefits of the technologies, and also how would you increase the possibility for training, because the access to technology comes obviously through training?
Well, what we are doing now, or we are starting that actually officially in September, is that we are starting a program that is called Decentralized Future, a program which will focus on providing educational and other tools for private and public sector in embracing this technology, and so they can start understanding benefits and how can they use it. I would like to see Western Balkans governments more going toward the electronic version, let's say, and putting more data transparent, and so they can be accountable for everything they are doing, because there is a lack of it at this point. But in general, this is something that I will be focusing in the next years in providing education and tools for private companies mostly, but also for public sector in embracing these new technologies.
Thank you. That would be very helpful. And Mihailo, can I ask your 2-minute thoughts on how you contribute to a healthier, greener, and more digital inclusive society?
Well, thank you for this question where we could talk about for hours and hours, I believe. So let me be short. On the first topic, I think that through my work at LIBEC, where we analyze public policies that are proposed by the government or non-government entities, and by pointing out to flaws in them or good sides, whichever happened first, basically we believe that we provide some kind of a service to a wider society, because then some of the bad solutions can be stopped during the legislative process, or some good solution could be swept better through the public administration. However, the second very important way how something like this should be tackled is through media and the meta-narratives. People do not usually believe in the data. People believe in stories. So basically we need to be there, and I hope that we are creating this through our media portal and by being guests to widespread Serbian mass media, providing the meta-narrative of optimism, of reform, of change, and of better future.
These are obviously important points, but you talk about the public policies, and I wonder how would you tackle the problem of implementation of the policies? Because something is having a policy, something else is an implementation challenge.
There are twofold problems here. One is the low capacities of the public administration, on which we are working for, because we organize courses for public administration workers in areas that we believe they lack their competencies. For example, the way of understanding of the policy process itself, on the way how public documents are to be properly analyzed using econometric techniques, etc., in order to provide the best possible solution, and how to why for it. And also we have the problem of democracy. Serbia has a regime that has, for the first time since the democratic changes in the 2000, has been described by the Freedom House as a hybrid regime. So the government in power is not really too keen on cooperating with out-of-government groups and service providers. They can be paranoid, which we have seen, although they have a good standing among the international community, mostly because of their lax stance on Kosovo and buying a good profile by providing enough vaccines for not only the population of Serbia, but for the whole region mostly. So we have much more problems than you could just see from a glance from abroad.
Yes, totally agree. But your point about skills building is nonetheless very important to raise at least the competences in the public sector. And I would now go to Ognian and ask him his thoughts about your contribution to the future of Eastern Europe.
Eric, microphone issue solved, and thank you for this question. Well, I believe that giving young people a chance to actively participate in decision-making processes related to either digitalization or environmental issues is a key step to be made. Youth can contribute with ideas, but also solutions. Here we have to have in mind, when it comes also to COVID-19, for example, innovative solutions and digital solutions for fighting the pandemic, bringing the health services closer to citizens, actually came from young people. And those ones who are leading creative startups, hubs, or owning their own businesses should be highly encouraged. And here I have to mention that it makes me very happy to see that a lot of international organizations and institutions are more and more recognizing the power of young people. In that sense, we need more innovative initiatives that would trigger youth innovation and engagements. And here I would like to mention Balkathon, which is the first ever Western Balkans competition event organized by RCC for the first time last year, and it continued this one. with the aim to trigger development of digital solutions in selected categories such as tourism, smart cities, e-health services, and similar. And we can see that actually it was a successful instrument for young people, startups, but also small and medium enterprises to actually unlock their innovative ideas and on that way contribute to the better future as you asked. But on the other side, I believe that we also need empowered young people on labor market. And here I would really like to stress the importance of economic and investment plan of the European Commission, and especially flagship 9 in regards to youth guarantee, which is a scheme that would provide all young people after finishing their education to have the first and initial employments. But on the other side, hopefully we will have it in the region as well, in recent future, but also being a scheme for young people, I believe that it has to be discussed with young people. So actually that is the rationale we are having in RCC, and that is something on what Western Balkan Youth Lab project is actually working, and that's the essence of the whole idea, because all the topics that are affecting lives of young people should be actually discussed, but also later on led by young people. And previously you asked about implementation of policies, and that is something also that we are focusing on, having in mind that we do not want to see young people being involved only in policy making, but also later on in implementing of those policies, but also evaluating of those policies, so that we can build on later on better and more inclusive policies when it comes to region. And here, and I will finish with this so that I don't take much of your time, but really, as Tobias asked earlier, some of the other panelists, brain drain is one of the key issues that we are having in the region. And here is the question, how we can change the brain drain to brain gain and actually bring young people, especially those ones, well-educated ones who spend their studies abroad, to come back to the region and contribute, especially having in mind that staggering 71% of Western Balkan youth would consider living and working abroad. So this needs really multi-sectorial approach, having in mind that it seems that it's regional and systematic issue that we should all work on. But again, we have to work also on brain drain with young people to see what are the needs, our needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ogyan. This is a very good point, and having people returning to country of origin. Being an Italian abroad, I have this feeling. But I actually wanted to ask, how would you increase the participation of young people in institutional decision making? Because we were talking about the participation in the economy, but in the institutional decision making, considering also that institutions, there are many people that are from another generation, but also the majority of the population is aging. There is a demographic problem that we mentioned before. So how to break this circle and increase the participation in institutional decision making of the youth?
Thank you, Erika. Great question, and actually, that's not an easy task to do, definitely. And here we would need to count on the openness of the governments from the region, first of all, and also to rely on the mechanisms, both formal and informal ones, that are existing at the EU level. And in that sense, having in mind institutional policy making, for example, EU Youth Dialogue as a principle or as a mechanism of including young people to discuss laws, strategies, action plans to different topics, as you asked on the very beginning, related to either digitalization, green agenda that now we are having for the Western Balkans, or maybe health, is something that we should focus on. But still, EU Dialogue really needs quite a lot of adjustments to the region, and having in mind the context of the region, because we are fully aware that something maybe that is working at the EU level would not maybe work in the Western Balkans. But still, the principles and the values that those mechanisms are having is something that we should really focus on and try to adjust it to the region and then include as much as young people as possible. And I have to say that within Western Balkan Youth Lab, we have actually created it, and the name of the project is actually the new innovative mechanism of policy making. And I have to say that for now we are quite satisfied with the process, even though it's a long-lasting process, and hopefully by the next of the next year we will have quite concrete results to share with the public in sense of what are actually the policies that have been created, institutional ones created by young people together with policymakers. Thank you, Erika.
Thank you very much again for these thoughts. And I want now to go to Radislav and hear his thoughts about his contribution as an economist and as a person working in the financial sector to make the region more healthier, greener, and more digital and inclusive.
Yes, so first of all, I would like to mention being a citizen, respecting the rules provided, like so-called citizen awareness. We are all forgetting that, I would say. Those rules are really important. Then another step is to bring that experience from abroad to your own country. There are so many people from Montenegro and from the region, including myself, that are studying in the EU countries. And I think this can be of the massive importance of developing of a new, healthier system, let's say. Another way is also, and it is really also important in my opinion, is a better connection with foreigners living and working here, so-called expats. And also my experience in investor relations and corporate governance showed me how things are different in our area, and showed me that there are so much space for improvement, like investments based on environmental and social and corporate governance principles are crucial. And at the end, the one that I also mentioned before is digitalization. This can be made by just following the steps, what I said also before, following steps from the developed countries and follow EU standards, let's say.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you think you can help converting like the brain drain and having people coming back to the region from abroad? Yeah,
as I said before, I think this is the main task for the government, and the government should basically motivate us young people to come back, and then provide the importance of us, let's say. Young people have to have this feeling that they are important in their own country. So this is the way. Thank you for the suggestions, Radislav. Thank you, Eric. Last but not least, I would like to hear Eric's view on what we've discussed during this past 10 minutes about how to make the region healthier, greener, more digital inclusive.
Well, quite many things have been mentioned, and I think the last point that Radislav mentioned just now is the will or the readiness of the government that is the main issue here. I mean, let's be honest, the young generation, young people, young students from the regions are winning many competitions when it comes to the education to some extent, winning the innovative solutions, but they are not given chance to implement, to use these, to advance this knowledge and bring it further. And this is basically the lack of incentives from the government, which needs to be changed. Now we can talk about the green, green solutions. We can talk about digitalization, but unless and until we have the incentive from the government, sort of, at least some kind of legal and regulatory, framework that would facilitate the development of these sectors, I think it is going to be a very, very daunting task for the individuals, unless they have some kind of, bigger investor support from the overseas. But again, this brings us to the issue of the whole investment. Why some of these regions are, avoided is because of the lack of transparency, political instability, lack of rule of laws and regulations, and doing business in many of these countries is at the bottom of the EU. So people don't want, I mean, the investors don't want to get in and support these projects because, I mean, it's not just about the money that they are investing, but at the same time, they are losing so much time. For example, in Bosnia, you need like 30, 40 days, even more, you know, just to open the company, which is, you know, nonsense. If we have the digital approach, you know, to submit the documents, to prepare the documents, you know, and open the company, it would be much easier like we have in some countries. Now, I mean, the funny thing is that, you know, I'm not talking about the Bosnia in particular. The funny thing is that we still need to do many things manually. We need to go to the front office. We need to bring some kind of crazy certificates, documents, even though if you show your ID, you know, they're still asking you for some kind of birth certificates and things like that, you know. And even though everything is already there in the system that we have, what is called the CIPS, and it should be integrated all over the country. But unfortunately, we are still, you know, walking from the office to sort out the simple things. Now, if we are unable to do this one, I mean, and this system is already implemented for more than 10, 15 years, I don't know exactly. If we are not able to operationalize and, you know, put this one in the right view, to the right use, how we are going to come up with the new solutions like we are talking about here, you know, having like digitally opening the account, you know, over the video calls and things like that, and sorting out the registering companies, paying the taxes completely online, you know, filling up the taxes and so on and so forth. So obviously what we are faced here is something that, you know, the authors Acemoglu and Robinson are talking about, you know, why nations fail. They fail primarily, according to them, because of the excessive institutions, extractive institutions. So this is what we have in majority of the Western Balkan countries, i.e. that the government, the apparatus of the government, this bureaucracy is taking too much, you know, space and too much of the GDP, and we cannot develop in that sense because we are wasting much of the time. At the same time, our institutions are, instead of being inclusive, they are exclusive. So this is the combination, according to the authors, for the failure. So unless this takes place, I mean, some kind of incentive from the government, we are not going to see any significant change. But definitely the young people, if they are involved, like we see it, like we heard from the other people, if they are involved, I'm sure that they contribute significantly, not only in you know, producing some kind of the policies, but also in implementation and evaluation state. I've been part of the young group that is supporting parliamentary people, but the funny thing is that, you know, even though we do the whole job, we prepare the documents, the only need from them is basically to pass it to the government and make it into law or something like that, but they are not doing that one. So it shows, I mean, they don't have any kind of responsibility. There is no any kind of, you know, due diligence on their part, and this is something that is significant.
There's more to do.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Edib, for sharing your thoughts with us. I believe that we have already had many good suggestions to eliminate barriers to participation decision-making, stop brain drain, increase digitalization and skills building. But now I want also to give the possibility to our audience to make questions. So I encourage everyone to write a question in the chat box at the bottom of the screen, and Tobias and I will pick on your questions and ask them to our speakers. In the meantime, I don't know if we have already any question in the chat box, but Tobias, I know that you had a question for our speakers, taking our privilege of the chairs. I think that we cannot hear Tobias. Okay. So in this case, I will.
Now it works. Sorry. Just
okay,
took us a while. My question is, and there's a question that I come across a lot in the Western Balkans. I mean, the use of cash is still extremely high, and there's obviously benefits corruption benefits, the black markets and so on. So I was just wondering, do you see this changing in the younger generations? Are they adopters of, digital payments, contactless payments, and so on? And how do you see this whole thing of, using cash developing in the future? I'm not sure who would like to answer that of you. Yeah, Edip, if yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't able to unmute myself at first. Well, I recently actually, given this, the changes in the cryptocurrencies that took place in last 20 days, I wrote a paper for the Al Jazeera, Balkans, the portal. And one of the, basically, the bottom line is that what I'm saying there is that the cryptocurrencies are there to stay, for sure. The only way is that, how the governments are now introducing the central banks cryptocurrencies, that they are trying to come up with these things so that they have control. Because the money is big issue for every government. So what I'm saying is that someone also mentioned that we need to basically adopt the technology as soon as possible. Unfortunately, this is not taking place in the region very much, but I think that is the future. We are going to have the sort of cashless society. In one report in Singapore that I've seen, the title was that the cash is dead. And indeed, I believe that, one of the major results of the COVID-19 would be that we are going to move more towards the cashless society in every way that is possible. How is going to be done? Are we going to still stick to these kind of credit cards? Definitely they will be there, but I'm sure that the new technology, new ways of the payments would be developed, as we have already so many, like in China, I forgot that the name of the payment. In US, you already have the Apple Pay and so on. So from that point of view, I believe that, young generation, they're highly educated in a sense when it comes to technical issues, and they are more inclined. The problem is, of course, this older generation that they are still skeptical to the use of even the ATM machines, and I mean, they are not skilled, or they are not that much aware of that. But for the generations to come, I think we are going to move significantly towards the cashless society.
Yeah, this is a very good point. We did a study a few weeks ago, and we determined this only in Serbia. You have a few billions of euro, which is somewhere in the system being held either in cash or somewhere else. And this is actually money that could be invested or could be lent to SMEs or different companies, which would increase economic growth. Hopefully.
You just reminded me of the case of Bosnia. You see, in Bosnia we have around 12 billion of the savings in the local banks. Okay, and that is the money that is idle, and the government is still borrowing from the World Bank. And I was at some point saying, don't go to the World Bank, don't go to the IMF. Basically, try to make the program, but of course, this is not in the interest of the government, because they need to change the many policies. But you see what happened. This government of the Republika Srpska borrowed at the London Stock Exchange at the rate much higher than they should be borrowing from the even local companies, local financial institutions, which is crazy, But no one is. I mean, that's like they came to the deaf ear, But what I'm saying is that we have significant amount of saving that could be utilized. Even though we have this pandemic, we have the lack of investments and so on, we could turn our faces, our focus on the local savings from the countries and arrange the system. There are many ways how it can be done, but we don't have time to discuss about that.
Yeah, that'd be a very broad one. Let's put it that way. Erica, do you have another question?
I will use again my privilege of being the chair to raise another question, but I still encourage everyone to make their questions now in the chat box. So in the meantime, we mentioned that the EU project is a two-way process, and in my work at IISS here in London, we've seen China's massive investment projects in the Western Balkan as part of the Balkan Silk Road, the regional segment of China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, and also rising Russia's influence. So I wanted to ask what you think. Do you think that the EU integration can lose steam in the face of these developments? And what is your view of the role of foreign investments for the prospect of economic growth and development in the region? And maybe Radislav can have a view on that. But feel free to chip in if you want to.
Yes, of course. So what, in my opinion, is essential for Montenegro, I will talk about my country, so is that when the foreign investment come, it is to direct those investments towards projects that benefit the overall growth and integration with the EU. The EU, acting together with major international and national financial institutions, has made further financial support worth more than 5 million to develop infrastructure in the whole area, all the regions. So, but also diversification also has its importance, and well-organized tendering procedures to achieve it with a close look at these ESG rules that I mentioned earlier. So the region by itself was always attractive to the West and to the East. So China, Russia, Turkey, they're always present as potential investors. So I think that we have to use this opportunity for the well-being of our people, first of all, but always keeping in mind the priority of joining the EU. I know that that it is evident that also in the EU there is so-called enlargement fatigue, but I would say that people here are also tired of waiting. So yes, that's my answer.
Very much, Radislav. Is there anyone that wants to add on what Radislav said? Mihailo?
I might add that even though we still see the influence of Russia and China in the region rising, at least the Chinese one, more than 80% of total FDI in Serbia, which is the main recipient in the Western Balkans. Basically, Serbia receives more FDI than all other countries in the region combined together. More than 80% of those FDIs come from the EU. Also, we have countries in the region that invest in Serbia, so the Chinese and the Russians are quite minuscule. However, the Serbian government, due to its propaganda purposes, tries to portray Chinese loans, state-owned enterprise loans to Serbia for infrastructure projects and as investments. However, these are just loans. The Serbian government needs to repay them in the future years. It is not something that is free. So we have like on different layers here. One is the economic issues. Will the Serbian government be able to repay these loans? However, for the time being, there is around 8% of the total Serbian debt that is owed to the Chinese government, which is quite low. Although we believe this will rise with new infrastructure projects, for example, the metro in Belgrade, etc. And will these infrastructure projects create an impetus for further economic development where they have been made?
Thank you very much for this contribution. Tobias, do we have any questions?
Currently not, but I mean, I have many questions, so very, very happy to chat to all of you. Following up on what I said before, I would like to focus a little bit more on the private sector, because obviously the policy should be guiding the private sector to generate economic growth over the long term. And you mentioned several times, currently in many of the Western Balkan countries, we have a very unfriendly business environment. I was just wondering, do you have any concrete solutions on how this can be improved? Obviously, government policies would be one factor. but also maybe with a view on cooperation between the different Western Balkan countries. Could this be a potential solution where you would create, let's say, some sort of technology hubs in a certain area, and then try to get companies to move from different areas to this hub? Could this be a potential solution? I mean, Slobodan, maybe you have a view on that.
Okay, I'm now unmuted. Well, yes, I believe there is a report by the EU that is called Untapped Potential for the Western Balkans, because the cooperation between those countries could significantly improve not only the position of private companies, but also of young people in general. And this is something that is very important, because it allows young people to be more involved and to go more in private ventures and to try putting their ideas on the market. And I believe this cooperation could be very beneficial. What can be obstacle at this moment is that most people, and this is something that I believe Ognjen spoke about, are trying to leave the region. And the others who are staying here most probably will be unemployed, and thus more eager to join political parties and political activism, in sense that they are being radicalized by political events here. And this is something that is slowing region in its progress, in sense that usually people from, although these countries share common history, knowledge, and culture, language and culture, there is divide in political sense, and that is what in some way politicians are using with young people, and especially those people who are staying in the region. So this is something that can slow the progress, but I believe that if we manage to go over this obstacle, and if we manage to solve this, I believe there is a great potential for this region to be what you said, innovative hub, and something that will be a significant contributor to European economy and competitiveness on the global level.
Do we maybe have already case studies or examples we could talk about? Because now, I mean, I work in the financial sphere, and the EBRD was promoting for a while at least, I mean, the Southeastern European link, so which is a linkage between different stock exchanges, just to increase the liquidity, and which resulted actually in positive impact on these different markets. So I'm just wondering, an example of where cooperation has worked out very well, especially with a view on the private sector.
Mm-hmm. Well, in general, mostly those case studies you're mentioning would be in, let's say, descriptive way, because there is also a significant lack of data that can support anything that we are talking here. So in general, I believe that there were a lot of projects, and since and young people who were organized themselves in some communities that were working together and are still working to promote a better region. One of them is, of course, Ognjen's organization that is working in the region. There was some private initiatives by young people in the past, in the form of Western Balkans Young Leadership Forum or something like that, in which young people try to engage more in overcoming the obstacles I mentioned. But in general, in sense of private sector, I believe there is not a lot of these actions at this point, although there are some ideas and some projects that are slowly appearing on the surface, although they are not that popular at the moment. But I believe that this is something that we may see in the future if if we understand the potential of it and why it is important, especially in this matter that I mentioned about trading barriers and how that is afflicting our everyday operations. And this is something that any company in the region, especially because the structure of companies in the Western Balkans region are mostly small and medium enterprises, are feeling very, very hard. So this is something that may be a common point where those organizations and companies can come together and start working.
Yeah, good point. I was thinking, it creates synergies. It costs a lot less after all. So it just, yeah, absolutely makes sense. And I've also read the report by the EU. I would have a few more questions. Yeah, please, you go, Erica.
Yes, we have now a question from the audience, and this is about the topic of migration of young people and more developing countries, because the reason related to salaries, healthcare, public administration, etc. And so the question is, what do you think the political issues between those countries? Do you think that is also a reason of emigration, the political aspect? And so reading some newspapers, this person says that that this is because of the tensions in the Balkan area, the political tensions. So what do you think about this problem of the political issues driving the immigration? Is there, yes, please, Mihailo?
Thank you for this question. Although I might be repeating myself, I believe that the younger generation has been born during the very turbulent times of the dissolution of Yugoslavia, bloody wars, genocide, ethnic cleansing, and all other jolly things that the Western Balkans has been known for. However, I believe because of that traumatic experience, the political situation and the tensions between countries today are a very, very low level of importance for the younger generations, because we've seen worse, and we don't think that current political tensions are something to worry about. However, I believe that people of my age or younger have lost optimism. They do not believe that in 10 years' time, the situation in their countries of origin will be better than it is today. They do not believe that their children will live a better life than they do. There has been a very strong outburst of positive energy after the democratic, let's say, transition in Serbia in the year 2000 after the fall of Milosevic. However, it was cut short by the murder of the first democratic Prime Minister Zoran Đinđić in 2003. That's very easy when you take a look at birth rates in Serbia. After the year 2000, they increase. After 2004, they decrease. So that is very, very strong way how optimism has a very strong impact on our overall lives, and also decisions where do we want to live and raise our families.
Thank you very much, Mihailo. I have also another question about the challenges of access to finance. And I think Edib could answer this one, since it is about the challenges of the ethnicity differences and related challenges in access to capital.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Well, when it comes to the access of the, I mean, again, this is very much related to the overall situation, in particular in Bosnia. I can talk about Bosnia because there are significant diversities between these two entities, Republika Srpska and Federation, of course, and the operations are very much limited. So given that fact, what we have at this stage is many times, the financial institutions that have a small market to operate. And this brings up the cost of these financial institutions to provide the financial solutions. The access to capital, then it is lower to the overall people. However, we have also the rising trend, and for many years, especially after the 1990s, we have rising trends of the microfinancial institutions that are, taking care of, certain, how to say, groups of the people, of the population, as for example, like these retired people. They have even the microfinancial institutions that provides to these people. However, in general, this is again very much limited to the the mortgage loans, for the leasings, for the purchases of these, like cars, like the apartments and similar things. Unfortunately, very few or very small amount is going to the investment. So the financial institutions are not. I mean, this could be on couple. There could be a couple of reasons for this one. First, that there are no significant or good projects that are coming in for these financial institutions. Second one is that the overall situation, the instability of the country, political and all these rule of law, the protection of the rights of all these parties that are participating in the market is another issue. And finally, of course, the financial institutions want to play safe. That is the reason why we see that in recent years that the fees, service fees are increasing significantly in the market in every way, which is a quite negative trend. So we are in much worse position than the EU countries in many ways, and this is due to the overall situation that we have.
Thank you very much, Edi. I want to ask another question, because I am the only woman in this panel, but I know that there is a long lineup of speakers and there are many other women. But I wanted to ask about the gender gap and what actions you think can be taken to improve the gender gap. And I want to ask the question to you all, whoever wants to answer, because it's a collective effort that also men need to take a part in it. Does anyone want to start? I know it's a difficult one. So the one. Oh, again.
Thank you, Erika. And actually, we are approaching to the end of the Youth Forum, and I would really like to see that maybe also in further editions there will be Youth Forum prior to the main panel discussions, and I believe that this is really a good message to be sent to the audience. But in the very same time, maybe for the following ones, as I'm sure that you will have it, it would be really great also to have more women or women included in the panel as well, and to hear their perspectives as well, having in mind that the high importance of the issue that you mentioned, including women in first of all, and supporting different initiatives in regards to women and entrepreneurship, women employment and similar, but also having women on the high policy ranking positions in institutions, but also in financial institutions as well, is of high importance. But and in that regard, I would like to say that the region has its, let's say, the key resource of the region is youth, but also women, but also vulnerable groups that we are having, which really need additional support from the governments, but also civil society, but also financial institutions. Here I would like to mention network of women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, that RCC launched this year. Having in mind that, and I have to just share a personal view, that I was amazed on how many successful women, young women we are having in the region that are dealing with engineering and mathematics, and that are actually having innovative projects in that regard. And in that sense, would highly encourage everyone, and following the discussions that will be today, that special emphasis shall be always made on youth, but also all different subcategories of youth, such as women, vulnerable groups, and similar. And maybe just as an idea for the future editions, or maybe additional events that you might have in mind, that I know that organization is quite open and always willing to have this innovative approach. Maybe even some follow-up as discussion of youth and women would be quite relevant.
Thank you very much again. Thank you. This is very encouraging. Unfortunately, our time is running up, and we need to conclude our youth forum on the future of Eastern Europe today. We heard the next generation's point of view on institutional problems of Eastern Europe, the challenges of COVID, the integration, and also the solutions for the future. And I will have to report the highlights of this discussion in the concluding session in the afternoon and give the chance to policymakers to hear your reflections and suggestions. So I want to thank everyone who attended this webinar, those who made questions. Thanks Tobias for facilitating the discussion, and most importantly, thank you to all 5 speakers and for your contribution and participation. And now back to the studio.
Franco. Thank you, Erika, and thank you to Tobias. I think you made a great job. So young chairs discussing with young panelists.
Franco, may we launch an applause to this young,
thank you,
young speakers, panelists, and chairs. Thank you very much.
Very good idea. So I think it was a good experience, and we have to replicate this in other occasions. I want just to pick up one thing what was said during the discussion. I remember probably Ognian, and saying that if there is a long-term consequences of a decision taken today, so the young generation should take part of that decision, because in the long term they will be bringing the consequences of that decision. So I was thinking about Brexit, but I mean we will discuss this in another occasion. Thank you to everybody. Hvala svima, and see you next time. Gianni.
Well, yes, thank you very much, everybody, because it has been really a very interesting session. And if the next generation, I would say the current generation actually, but if the next generation is this generation, well, there are good reasons for optimism, and there is room for improving also in those regions the social, political, and economic situation. So, what to say now? We have a short break, which is not actually a break, it is a bridge, which is bringing us to the first webinar of the forum that will take place in about 25 minutes, 11:30. And the title is The New Geopolitical and Business Context for the Post-COVID Recovery. It will be a very challenging, a very, very dense, a very important session, and we'll see you in about 25 minutes. In the meanwhile, please stay tuned and give a look at 2 very interesting interviews. The first one is with Anna Gervasoni, Director General for the Italian Association of Corporate Finance, of the private equity and private debt. And the second one is with Michele Morganti of Generali Investments. So stay tuned, and anyway, we'll see you in about 25 minutes. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure for me, for the Italian Private Equity, Venture Capital and Private Debt Association, AIFI, to be here. So I think it's a very crucial moment to reinvent our economy. And all of us, we are hoping that the pandemic could be soon over control. But now we are facing the need to define a new context in which the European economy could return to growth. And let me look at the SMEs first of all. In this framework, it's important to reactivate a virtuous cycle, bring investors, both private and public, to invest in real economy in order to give fuel to SMEs and having a positive impact on innovation, sustainability, and job creation. Job creation is central, is crucial, and let me give you a figure. In the 2019, in Europe, 10.2 million European employees worked in private-backed and venture capital-backed companies. So this number is the 4.3% of the total European employees, and it represents the same number of the Portugal or Sweden's workforce. So very important number. And to realize 10 million, 20 million of employment in those SMEs, very innovative, with a very strong commitment to realize innovation path to growth and to realize sustainability goals. We have to work all together, and we need a real capital market union. So why? First of all, because international funds, European funds, have no nationality. So in every country, we are working together, local funds and international pan-European funds. I define them stateless because they raise capital everywhere and they can invest on a global scale in order to pick up winners, future champions, in order to give money, advisory to entrepreneurs, and to work together in this very crucial transition progress. So I hope we can strongly define a new framework context, a new legal context, where we can realize a strong new European community with more private finance, working together with public finance, of course. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm glad to be here at the FeBAF event once again. I will tell you about the most relevant changes for the insurance industry group post-COVID. The global pandemic and the consequent health and economic crisis have forced huge social changes to adapt to the new normal. Two key elements that have been pushed by the pandemic crisis as levers of change are the fast acceleration of technology and the focus on sustainability, which is key in restoring a safe growth which takes care of the increased inequality. Concerning technology, COVID-19 epidemic has increased the audience of technology users, first boosting the tech-changing trends, accelerating the customer adoption of digital-based interaction models, and forcing insurers quickly to adapt to the new normal. InsurTech businesses are extending the application of innovative technology, gaining competitive advantage, as well as potentially valuable opportunities for partnerships with incumbents in this evolving scenario. How quickly incumbents adapt to these inexorable market changes will determine the size of their share in the future industry of insurance. Among the main objectives, improve risk selection, improve customer behavior, and among the main area of intervention, we have operation efficiency, cost reduction, digital distribution, and customer satisfaction. Among some examples, we have telemedicine and addressing client expectation, which are increasing focusing on protection. Concerning sustainability, the EU Recovery Fund and the Green Deal are accelerating the digital adoption made during the crisis, rendering the economy more sustainable. Green technology is also growing faster, representing big opportunities for institutional investors and public saving investments. In particular, pandemic has highlighted the need for strategic and shared prevention plans, preparing for climate change, which is a global threat. Such commitment has become stricter and more broadly shared. But more importantly, the European community has chosen to share the Ecologist project to refund its economic integration. Part of the EU recovery will be funded with green bonds and channeled through green initiatives. As a consequence, financial regulators are introducing climate risk disclosure as mandatory, and biggest international institutional investors are making sustainability the new standard for investing. Insurance corporations are setting ambitious ESG targets with increasing focus on social dimension. The sustainability and ESG trends are reversible and will soon involve Southern European countries, which will have to organize and equip themselves as soon as possible to be ready for the new challenge. The sooner this new trend will be embraced in SEE, and the sooner local players will be competitive also at the European level. Generali Group has launched a crucial phase of definitive internalization of ESG criteria in business processes and investment processes. We strongly believe that the new frontier of ESG investing is focused on in companies, the improvers, that show they want to become more focused on the issues of sustainability with the aim to scaling up the ESG score system. Generally, given its strong presence in Eastern European countries and ongoing development process in terms of sustainability, hopes to make the right contribution to the future ESG transition of the insurance and asset management business. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure for me, for the Italian Private Equity Venture Capital and Private Debt Association, AIFI, to be here. So I think it's a very crucial moment to reinvent our economy. And all of us, we are hoping that the pandemic could be soon over control. But now we are facing the need to define a new context in which the European economy could return to growth. And let me look at the SMEs first of all. In this framework, it's important to reactivate a virtuous cycle, bringing investors, both private and public, to invest in real economy in order to give fuel to SMEs and having a positive impact on innovation, sustainability and job creation. Job creation is central, is crucial, and let me give you a figure. In the 2019 in Europe, 10.2 million European employees worked in private-backed and venture capital-backed companies. So this number is the 4.3% of the total European employees, and it represents the same number of the Portugal or Sweden's workforce. So very important number. And to realize 10 million, 20 million of employment in those SMEs, very innovative, with a very strong commitment to realize innovation path to growth and to realize sustainability goals. We have to work all together, and we need a real capital market union. So why? First of all, because international funds, European funds, have no nationality. So in every country, we are working together, local funds and international pan-European funds. I define them stateless because they raise capital everywhere and they can invest on a global scale in order to pick up winners, future champions, in order to give money, advisory to entrepreneurs and to work together in this very crucial transition progress. So I hope we can strongly define a new framework context, a new legal context, where we can realize a strong new European community with more private finance, working together with public finance, of course. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm glad to be here at the FeBAF event once again. I will tell you about the most relevant changes for the insurance industry group post-COVID. The global pandemic and the consequent health and economic crisis have forced huge social changes to adapt to the new normal. Two key elements that have been pushed by the pandemic crisis as levers of change are the fast acceleration of technology and the focus on sustainability, which is key in restoring a safe growth which takes care of the increased inequality. Concerning technology, COVID-19 epidemic has increased the audience of technology users, further boosting the tech-changing trends, accelerating the customer adoption of digital-based interaction models, and forcing insurers quickly to adapt to the new normal. InsurTech businesses are extending the application of innovative technology, gaining competitive advantage, as well as potentially valuable opportunities for partnerships with incumbents in this evolving scenario. How quickly incumbents adapt to these inexorable market changes will determine the size of their share in the future industry of insurance. Among the main objectives, improve risk selection, improve customer behavior, and among the main area of intervention, we have operation efficiency, cost reduction, digital distribution, and customer satisfaction. Among some examples, we have telemedicine and addressing client expectation, which are increasingly focusing on protection. Concerning sustainability, the EU Recovery Fund and the Green Deal are accelerating the digital adoption made during the crisis, rendering the economy more sustainable. Green technology is also growing faster, representing big opportunities for institutional investors and public saving investments. In particular, pandemic has highlighted the need for strategic and shared prevention plans, preparing for climate change, which is a global threat. Such commitment has become stricter and more broadly shared. But more importantly, the European community has chosen to share the Ecologist project to refund its economic integration. Part of the EU recovery will be funded with green bonds and channeled through green initiatives. As a consequence, financial regulators are introducing climate risk disclosure as mandatory, and biggest international institutional investors are making sustainability the new standard for investing. Insurance corporations are setting ambitious ESG targets with increasing focus on social dimension. The sustainability and ESG trends are reversible and will soon involve Southern European countries, which will have to organize and equip themselves as soon as possible to be ready for the new challenge. The sooner this new trend will be embraced in SEE, and the sooner local players will be competitive also at the European level. Generali Group has launched a crucial phase of definitive internalization of ESG criteria in business processes and investment processes. We strongly believe that the new frontier of ESG investing is focused on in companies, the improvers, that show they want to become more focused on the issues of sustainability with the aim to scaling up the ESG score system. Generally, given its strong presence in Eastern European countries and ongoing development process in terms of sustainability, hopes to make the right contribution to the future ESG transition of the insurance and asset management business. Thank you very much.
pleasure for me, for the Italian Private Equity Venture Capital and Private Debt Association, AIFI, to be here. So I think it's a very crucial moment to reinvent our economy. And all of us, we are hoping that the pandemic could be soon over control, but now we are facing the need to define a new context in which the European economy could return to growth. And let me look at the SMEs first of all. In this framework, it's important to reactivate a virtuous cycle, bringing investors, both private and public, to invest in real economy in order to give fuel to SMEs and having a positive impact on innovation, sustainability and job creation. Job creation is central, is crucial, and let me give you a figure. In the 2019 in Europe, 10.2 million European employees worked in private-backed and venture capital-backed companies. So this number is the 4.3% of the total European employees, and it represents the same number of the Portugal or Sweden's workforce. So very important number. And to realize 10 million, 20 million of employment in those SMEs, very innovative, with a very strong commitment to realize innovation path to growth and to realize sustainability goals. We have to work all together, and we need a real capital market union. So why? First of all, because international funds, European funds, have no nationality. So in every country, we are working together, local funds and international pan-European funds. I define them stateless because they raise capital everywhere and they can invest on a global scale in order to pick up winners, future champions, in order to give money, advisory to entrepreneurs, and to work together in this very crucial transition progress. So I hope we can strongly define a new framework context, a new legal context, where we can realize a strong new European community with more private finance, working together with public finance, of course. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm glad to be here at the FeBAF event once again. I will tell you about the most relevant changes for the insurance industry group post-COVID. The global pandemic and the consequent health and economic crisis have forced huge social changes to adapt to the new normal. Two key elements that have been pushed by the pandemic crisis as levers of change are the fast acceleration of technology and the focus on sustainability, which is key in restoring a safe growth which takes care of the increased inequality. Concerning technology, COVID-19 epidemic has increased the audience of technology users, further boosting the tech-changing trends, accelerating the customer adoption of digital-based interaction models, and forcing insurers quickly to adapt to the new normal. InsurTech businesses are extending the application of innovative technology, gaining competitive advantage, as well as potentially valuable opportunities for partnerships with incumbents in this evolving scenario. How quickly incumbents adapt to these inexorable market changes will determine the size of their share in the future industry of insurance. Among the main objectives, improve risk selection, improve customer behavior, and among the main area of intervention, we have operation efficiency, cost reduction, digital distribution, and customer satisfaction. Among some examples, we have telemedicine and addressing client expectation, which are increasing focusing on protection. Concerning sustainability, the EU Recovery Fund and the Green Deal are accelerating the digital adoption made during the crisis, rendering the economy more sustainable. Green technology is also growing faster, representing big opportunities for institutional investors and public saving investments. In particular, pandemic has highlighted the need for strategic and shared prevention plans, preparing for climate change, which is a global threat. Such commitment has become stricter and more broadly shared. But more importantly, the European community has chosen to share the Ecologist project to refund its economic integration. Part of the EU recovery will be funded with green bonds and channeled through green initiatives. As a consequence, financial regulation
So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Buongiorno, amici e amiche. Good morning, everybody, for being with us today for this seventh edition of the Trieste Eastern Europe Investment Forum. Let me thank all the young panelists who joined us this morning for the first edition of the Youth Forum. We had a very interesting session dedicated to the young generation, well, to the next generation, as it's called in European terms. So, my name is Gianfrancesco Rizzuti. I will be today for a while together with my friends and colleagues to introduce our distinguished panelists during the whole day. It will be a very dense day, but a very interesting one. And let me also introduce, on behalf of the Italian Banking, Insurance and Finance Federation that has been organizing this forum for 7 years, let me introduce my colleague Franco Del Neri, who is with us today in the backstage, but he will soon get on the stage, replacing me, of course. But let me introduce also Federica Seganti, who is the Program Director of the Master in Insurance and Risk Management at the MIB Trieste School of Management, which is our traditional partner in organizing this prestigious event.
Yes, it is.
Federica.
It is. Hi. Thank you, Gianni, and it's a pleasure to be here to welcome all the ladies and gentlemen connected with our seminar, with our web forum. And it's a great pleasure to discuss with you today about the next generation Eastern Europe, the role of investment and finance during the Trieste Eastern Europe Investment Forum 7th edition. And the topic is very challenging, and we have the chance to discuss about it thanks to a large number of European experts, academics, managers, and now it's time to start, I think, and to move to Trieste, where there are two important persons that are the chair, the head of our organization. And in particular, it's a very great honor for me to introduce to you Professor Andrea Tracogna, Dean of MIB Trieste School of Management, and Mr. Innocenzo Cipolletta, the chair of FeBAF. And now I would like to connect to Trieste, where I think there is, okay. Hi, Andrea. Thanks to be here. Hi, Mr. Cipolletta. And Andrea, the floor is yours for your welcome speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Federica, and good morning to everybody. Welcome to this Trieste Eastern Europe Investment Forum, which MIB, Trieste School of Management, together with FeBAF, is hosting and co-organizing, and we are very pleased and honored for this. Unfortunately, as in 2020, we have to run this event remotely. Our hope is for the year 2022, when the situation will be back to normal, to host again the forum at our beautiful premises here in Trieste, the Ferdinandeo Palace, from where I am speaking. Let me just say a couple of words about the special link between Trieste, MIB, and the Eastern European countries. The city of Trieste has a long-standing tradition of cooperation, a common history with Eastern Europe, a tradition of trading, financial, insurance links and operations in the Eastern European countries. As regards MIB, we have, of course, a more recent history. We were established in 1988, but since the very beginning, we had a clear focus towards East. In 1988, we designed and launched our first master, the MBA in International Business, with a focus on Eastern Europe, at a time when the Berlin Wall was still standing very firmly, And when none of the following radical changes were even conceivable. Further, it has to be said that thanks to our geographic proximity to Eastern Europe, we have always attracted plenty of students from these countries, and in particular from Southeast Europe and the Balkans. What to say? Well, we have been leveraging on the relations with hundreds of students and graduates over these 30 years. And we can say that we have become privileged and direct observers of the many changes that have taken place in the last decades over there. I mean, and I refer to the establishment of new national states, to the harsh conflicts and wars fought there, the challenging economic transformations, the pre-accession and the accession processes to the European Union of many countries, and last but not least, the new recent challenges related to the pandemic and the post-COVID scenario. I would say that Southeastern Europe, the Balkans, Eastern European countries in general have become part of our school's microcosm. I mean, they stand apart from the rest of the world as they have become a laboratory of research and analysis for us. Analysis and research that takes place at different dimensions. Economic dimension, business, social, demographic, political, and of course also financial, as we will see and learn during this forum. And we are looking forward as MIB to taking part to the discussions in this forum, and we wish to all the speakers, the delegates, the participants, a fruitful exchange of ideas, of views, of practices. With the hope of meeting you again in person soon here in Trieste, we wish you fruitful participation and good work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea. And of course, all of us, thanks that next year will be face-to-face in Trieste. And now, Mr. Cipolletta, Chair of FeBAF, thanks, and the floor is yours.
Good morning to everyone. I would like to welcome all of you for the participation to the Trieste Eastern Europe Investment Forum of 2021. It's also for me the first time I am here because I was nominated the president of FeBAF just a few days ago. And this forum will start this year earlier at 9:30 with an initial session dedicated to the younger generation. I was very impressed by the young panelists, which we have selected through an independent survey made in the Southeastern European region in the last weeks, with the involvement of the local youth association. They discussed about the biggest challenges in the Southeastern Europe's economic growth, the integration process of the Western Balkan into the European Union, and the role of the private financial sector. They brought to our financial community food for thought with their amazing and useful views and the contribution of ideas for a healthier, greener, more digital and inclusive society. Growing inequality between generations has been exacerbated by the pandemic and has left many people in their teens, 20s and 30s feeling like they have got a raw deal. We must give an answer to their concern. Moving now to the theme of the forum, the 7th edition, let me say that the Southeastern and more broadly the Pan-European region is the new frontier of the continental economy and finance, but also in large part of the institutional building of the European Union itself. In the next two sessions, our consultant, Professor Kozarevich, will bring to us the results of the study on banks and insurance sectors, performed with data contribution from 13 countries, with very different political, economic, and social systems. An area that has become central to the unstable and conflicting multipolarity that today threatens international collaboration as well as international peace and security. The post-COVID recovery offers new risks, but also opportunities in relation to the restructuring of a global value chain, which have been heavily impacted by the crisis. These chains are in fact regionalizing, shortening, and becoming more resilient, thus fully investing the geostrategic location of the Eastern Europe and Mediterranean area. And Italy is in the middle with all the risks that this entails, but also the significant opportunities. The Union has developed the policy of gradual integration of the country of the Western Balkans, but with stop-and-go delays, contradictory signals, and divergent visions. It is time to accelerate the process of unfinished business of Southeastern Europe. Capital market issue will be the theme of the fourth session, which will be developed with the substantial contribution of our partner, the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, who play an essential and strategic role in Eastern Europe and in the Mediterranean area. The need for a strong regional capital market and innovative solutions has never been stronger, and the role of public and private equity markets in the regions in financing the recovery is essential, together with the foreign and the local institutional investors. Space for growth are also evident for our Italian private financial sector. Most of these economies are characterized by differentiated and evolving banking sectors, a significant and widespread level of underinsurance, and still underdeveloped capital market. All elements that, combined with the presence of many Italian companies in the area, strengthen the prospects of our banks, insurance company, fund, financial companies that already operate in this area or intend to do it in the future. Finally, let me warmly thank the Minister of Finance of Montenegro for agreeing to attend our last sessions and all speakers involved in all 6 sections. In the last session, we will make the conclusions of the forum and discuss the role of financial community in the post-COVID era. We need to move towards the Eastern Europe policy agenda. Dear friend, there is a lot to do. The benefit that can be drawn from integration are high, not only for our business, but for the stability and the prosperity of the area. And we as FeBAF want to do our part of the job. Thank you for your attention. And now back to the studio.
Thank you, Innocenzo Cipolletta. Thank you, Andrea Tracogna. And let's say that both their speeches give very clear reasons why we have chosen Trieste for Eastern Europe, why Italy and Trieste are both that important for both the Mediterranean area and the Balkan and the Eastern Europe area. And that's why, as a FeBAF, we've been organizing these fora for a significant lapse of time, and we've been also facing the Mediterranean area thanks to our Mediterranean Investment Forum that will take place in the next few weeks or months. So let's now enter straight into the first session of our forum, and which is dedicated to the new geopolitical and business context for the post-COVID recovery. And how do we enter this very first session? We enter thanks to the speeches of Paolo Garonna, who is the FeBAF Secretary General, and who will be in Trieste with the chairman of the Generali Group, Mr. Gabriele Galateri di Genola, and they will be with us for a while. And Paolo Garonna will interview. There will be a sort of an interview on behalf of the community, which is represented in this case by Paolo Garonna, towards Mr. Galateri. And so, Paolo, I think that the best way is to leave you the floor and give you the word. Paolo, please. There must be some.
Particularly warm welcome to Dr. Galateri, who I'm sure doesn't need to be introduced. He has done amazing things in his curriculum, but he's now chairman of Assicurazioni Generali, a major insurance company in Italy, in Europe, in Eastern Europe, not only because of its origin, but also because headquarters are here in Trieste, a few miles from here. By the way, let me echo what the previous speakers said about how nice it is to be in Trieste, isn't it, Gabriele?
Absolutely.
It's fantastic to be this beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful buildings in Trieste, an Habsburg palace, in the middle of a wood, a park, beautiful park. And so I echo what others have said about the prospects that next year, hopefully, many of you will be joining us, sharing with us the beauty of these premises. So I think we have the best location, the best speaker, and the best company for starting our conversation. So the first question, Gabriele, is what is your view? Give us an overview of where we stand in Eastern Europe and in the recovery post-COVID.
Thank you, Paolo. And let me thank all the organizers for inviting me. It's, as you said, it's a great opportunity to be in Trieste, to be in MIB, to be with you, and with all the other speakers. You see, I think that we are in a very, very interesting moment. And I would say that, I don't want to be excessively positive, but I would not have been 6 months ago or 1 year ago. But today I see really a moment that we have to take advantage of. I mean, Europe has proved to be a great organization, a great success after years in which there were a lot of questions concerning the possibility for Europe really to remain united, to confront such a critical situation like COVID. Finally, with the next generation EU, I like, the word of saying that this has been a game changer. Europe has become a different reality, much more secure, much more solidarity, much more solidarity with the other nations. So it has given, really the proof of what it should have been already since a long time, but what it is now. I think that for the Central Eastern European countries, this moment also can be very important. Those countries have benefited in an important way from the participation into the European Union, from an institutional and a political and economic point of view. And I believe that the Western Balkans are inevitably and hopefully and with great attention, at least from my point of view, become in the future part of this enlarged Europe. Europe has to expand, and the area of the Western Balkans is absolutely, for many reasons that historical, cultural, business-wise, they're extremely logic to join Europe sooner or later. Some countries have done already some moves. Northern Macedonia has even changed the name to get ready to become part of Europe. Bulgaria and Croatia have entered the Euro. The Schengen area is studying how to open the borders. So there is a general direction that is definitely positive towards a Europe that will enlarge in this area. Of course, there are risks, and the risks should push Europe to really take this possibility seriously into consideration. Risks are other, operators, other actors that want to get influence in this region, and it's not a mystery that China has made important inroads in some of these countries with the Belt and Road program and projects. you all know, what happened in Montenegro, coming, financing, building, and then, in front of difficulty to repay a loan. And now, there is a question of what's going to be the action of China having some rights on some land. On the other side, Russia has been quite active in providing vaccines, the Sputnik 5, to several countries in the area. And again, it is quite obvious that this region is extremely important for Europe, but also for the equilibrium in the world. So I'm sure that this progress has to speed up, and I take advantage of one of your essay, Paolo, that I read some time ago. I think that we should also think that Europe is not only the Europe that we know today, not only the Europe that will include the Western Balkans, but also the Europe that we have to pay a lot of attention to the countries of North Africa, because our world, the world where Europe can be a really stabilizer. And my frequent comment is that the world has today two big blocks on which it stands, China and the US. I think that it is absolutely necessary that at that table there is a third chair, and that chair is for Europe, and enlarge Europe, a Europe that is more inclusive and more sustainable, more innovative, as we will say maybe in a few minutes.
Well, thank you. But let me ask you an impertinent question, because I do share your optimism. Undoubtedly, we have seen a response to the crisis in the EU, which is unprecedented. But also this crisis has highlighted old vulnerabilities and also created new divides. Some of the countries we are talking about, Eastern Europe, you mentioned North Africa and the Euro-Mediterranean area, they did not have the capacity, fiscal capacity or the monetary policy capacity to respond. So, I mean, the question is how far is the European Union prepared to go to, well, also to respond to its responsibility to the past commitments. You see, in a few years, a couple of years, there will be 20 years from Thessaloniki. In 2003, Thessaloniki, the European Union promised these countries, the Western Balkans, to accede the European Union. And don't you think that because of this hesitation in the relationship between the European Union and its near abroad, there is a risk of losing credibility, of visibility in relation to the activism you mentioned? I mean, this is an area where we see global players, regional players, very active, from the US to China, Russia, Turkey. And is the European up to the challenge, and what should and could the European Union do?
Yeah, you are right. A lot of events that happened in the past can create doubts and uncertainties in terms of the program that I was trying to design. But a lot of things have happened in the meanwhile, and I think that we have to be comforted by the fact that all the hesitancies, all the uncertainties, let's put it also this way. The leaderships that led Europe in the past may be confronted with the new leaderships that have learned from the mistakes of the past, can give us some better hope that things this time will not be abandoned. The crisis have proved, I would have never thought that Europe could produce the next generation EU, 750 billion euros financed by all the community. This would have never happened in the past. It has happened. It shows that when things come to the bottom of the floor, Europe is capable to react. I think that this is a great sign, and to be even more optimistic in the end, of course, I will make a statement also of being realistic, because it's not just good to be optimistic, but I think that Europe has perceived now the pleasure, the understanding that moving along this way, it creates a better place for itself in the world. It is more credible. It is heard in a more intense way. So, in my view, always things like what happened with the 750 billion next generation EU happened because of the crisis. So, as Winston Churchill said, never let the crisis go. Use the crisis. And unfortunately, good things often start after a crisis. I don't expect, I don't hope that we need another crisis of a political kind to make Europe more politically united, but Europe has to become a more clear political and strategic powerhouse. This is absolutely necessary, as I said before. And what has happened in the recent past, I mentioned the crisis, I mentioned the reaction to the crisis, I mentioned the change in leadership around Europe. I mean, Merkel did a great job during a long time, but there were several difficulties in other countries. Today we have, and I speak from a country that with Draghi and its ministers is giving sign that things can change in a radical way, having people that really not only have views, but also are capable to make these views come true. Because in the end, the game is always the same, not just saying things, it's also implementing things. And if we see how the entire COVID, situation has developed, look at the Central Eastern European countries, what they did, in line with what the Western Europe did. Starting the COVID, they had, a rather milder, maybe consequence of COVID. Then it became much worse. The second and the third wave for the Central Eastern European countries was much worse than what was happening at that time in the rest of Europe. And the consequences were, very, very dramatic on population, on economies. We've seen countries, Serbia losing 1% of the GDP, but Montenegro losing 15% of GDP in 2020. So, and from there, the reaction came. The reaction came through the vaccination programs, which shows that when you are in front of a guy, the world reacts, the science reacts, so we're still capable to find solutions. So the vaccine program that is picking up and moving fast here, as in Italy, as in France, as in the US, and giving hope for the future. I notice in the place where we live, in Trieste, in Milan, in Torino, and even in other countries where I start moving again, people see the future with a different, and we expect the GDP in the different countries moving even beyond the initial expectations. In Italy now, a lot of institutions expect that instead of being the 4% imagined by the IMF, it's going to be maybe even 4.7, maybe 5%. So this, and on top of this, the monetary and fiscal policies of the different institutions in the countries, including in the Balkans and in Central and Eastern Europe, have supported, have given a push to the economic system. And then we see little by little in the services area, the tourism is picking up. I saw recently beautiful beaches in Croatia and in other zone of the area full of people, and the demand of other countries that have already moved on brilliantly, like, as I said, China, US, is creating further demand for goods from this area. And that, let's not forget the impact of the Next Generation EU, which will help, countries that are surrounding this area growing faster, and growing faster means higher demand. So this will drag, it will push even some of the most fragile countries in the Western Balkans to take advantage of this. And let's make a quick comment on the Next Generation EU. The Next Generation EU is what I said initially, a real game changer. I've never seen something like this in the past 20, 30 years. It is helping particularly countries like some of the Balkan countries that have a rather low GDP per capita, but it's helping a lot also countries like Italy, like Spain. And what is program going to do? It is going to allow these countries to modernize, to invest in infrastructures, which are highly important for the development of these countries, will allow to modernize it also in many other areas in terms of education, which I believe is one of the most critical areas everywhere in order to allow the new generations and also the older generation to confront the world of innovation and of sustainability that we'll have to develop. And it has to invest in research and so on. Overall, my last comment on this item is this Next Generation EU will allow improved stability in the area, improved stability of Europe, more credibility of Europe. The result will be a Europe that finally finds its correct place in the world, which is long overdue.
I agree with you. There is definitely a new climate, and I think Europe is prepared and should be prepared to do whatever it takes in the next few months and
to
years.
Use a famous
exactly, to use a nice quote, for delivering on its promises. But let me now turn to insurance, because I think, well, I'm sure you agree with me that it has become, in a world of structural uncertainties, black swans, unknown unknowns, the business of insurance has become much more challenging, but also more fun, more interesting. I think measuring and managing risks in areas like climate change or even health security now, not to speak of geopolitical stability, it's a challenge. And so how do you see this new environment affecting the business model of insurance, and what prospects does this give to the business sector?
Yes, Paolo, you know that I come from long experiences in many other sectors, very different from insurance. So when I joined the insurance sector some years ago, I was a little bit puzzled by what, this sector that we all know because we have to pay, the coverage for our RC in the automobile or for protecting our houses. But insurance, of course, is much more. First of all, the experience of insurance in the pandemic period has been extremely important and extremely teaching for me, at least. First of all, it is a sector which has proved to be what many people call it resilient. We've been able, after 2 weeks, to take care of our employees with smart working. 90% of people went into smart working in 2 weeks after the start of the pandemic. And they were able, smart working, to continue doing their activity, to continue in their role, which is the second big element of resiliency, taking care of the clients. Clients were supported in a very delicate moment from a health point of view, from some other risk point of view, from a business interruption point of view, was helped. And, honestly, of course, I'm not an element of key statistic, but I mean, the criticism that I heard during all this time were really limited. So our people were capable, our agents, to maintain their engagement, which in our purpose is defined be a lifetime partner of our clients. We really have been, in this period, lifetime partner. So partner even in moments in which life, is not as easy as before. And this is also proved by the economic results of the insurance sector. The Solvency II, which, as you know, is an indicator of balance sheet solidity, was really high and really important. 224%. For us, about 200% of the other players. So the minimum, is 100%. So it shows that have been able to confront a moment of very complicated financial markets, very low interest rates, a lot of disruptions along, the different value chains in a rather solid way. Second element of this sector, compared also to other sectors that I lived in the past, from the mechanication and so on, we are in a position to be also part of the solution development. We can be in the recovery plan that has been launched. We, first of all, as a sector, not unfortunately just a Generali, we as a sector manage in Europe alone 11 trillion euros of assets. This is an enormous reality of firepower that can be, used in part, of course, and respecting all the rules of the insurances, but used for long-term investments, for supporting the efforts of government and public institutions. So we have an enormous expertise, as you can imagine, in judging investments, evaluating investments, controlling investments, and this can be offered, and we offered it to governments and to public institutions. We started projects that we call the private-public fund, in particular pandemic fund, which are a very important benchmark for this crisis, but also, I warn everyone, for future systemic crises, because we talk about pandemic, but we do not have to forget that there are around many systemic risks that sooner or later will appear, unfortunately. And I don't want to be, talking about risk in the future, but you hear Bill Gates, you hear other people that say the question is not if, the question is when these other risks will materialize. And they talk about cyber security. I talk about catastrophe risk and so on. All these things are too big to be managed only by private sector. We need to operate public and private, and in some cases already functioning. So I'm sure that this is going to be one new, event that new will be taking place in the future. We have launched ourselves a fund called the Fenice 190, and 190 is because we are celebrating this year in Trieste 190 years since the starting of our company that was born in Trieste in 1831. And this is a program directed to invest 3.5 billion euros in 5 years in the direction of supporting SMEs, in supporting households in order to make projects that will move along, the public institution orientation. And then, if I have 2 minutes more of time, we are important supporters of the two main guidelines that the European Union has clearly indicated, the sustainability project and the innovation project. Sustainability has become since years, but now it has been accelerated in terms of governance into our group. It is really in the DNA of our group. Our plan, our strategic plan that we will review at the end of this year, will start with the question of the ESG component as part of the process, as part of the products, as part of the strategies. ESG has entered into our processes, into our products, investments, underwritings. So we are building assets in the green area. We are proposing services that take advantage of all the technology that are available, including how you reach your client in a digital way, how you can inform about a claim through video inspections. There is plenty of new things that will go along with the indication that the European Union has given. And being also chairman of an Institute of Technology in Italy, I know how many developments and improvements in technology are taking place, and how many of these improvements can be part of insurance products that we sell already in some countries, France, Germany, and even in Italy. And last, in the sustainability area, we have launched a project called the Human Safety Net, which will take care of disadvantaged families and immigration in terms of including them in the economic arena. It is expanding in an incredible way, and believe me, it is one of the most appreciated programs that we have in our group. You cannot imagine how many employees and colleagues are actively constantly when they move in one country or the other on how we're moving. We're now, after 3 years of launching the program, we are in 21 countries. We are assisting hundreds of thousands of people, so it is really a proof that this works. And then on innovation, just one comment. Insurances have been born on data. As you know, data were the basis for whatever kind of insurance that we could create. Now we talk about big data. So we have plenty of data, plenty of capacities of data to improve processes against fraud, in order to improve our forecast, in order to improve the possibility of offering a modular service to our client. So there is plenty on our, and in the region, in the Central Eastern European region, we have launched a regional digital acceleration program in March 2020, where we are introducing possibilities from a digital connection, real time between clients and agents, clients and the company. We are introducing a process to improve the entire area of claim management. So there is an enormous change underway, and this area is extraordinarily efficient and dynamic in pursuit. And I close with two quick indications. The asset manager is another branch or leg of the insurance business, not only life, but asset management. We are creating a hub of asset management in Poland and in Slovenia. They are producing and distributing products in the area to take advantage also of the possibility of giving a return to savings of the population in this period. We have brought one of our companies specialized in the ESG assets called Sycamore from France in order to provide updated services to the local population, and it is working correctly. So I see plenty of opportunities. This is why maybe you hear me more positive than normally I should be, but I will conclude by saying that I'm still realistic, which means that I know that there are a lot of obstacles to reach what I'm indicating, but if you don't see the flag far away, you will never find your rope. So this is my point. Let's believe that there is a new normal, as they say, or even a different normal that is in front of us. We have to get there, and this will be extremely positive for Europe in itself, for the Eastern Europe, and particularly for the West Balkans when they will join Europe. And let me add that this will be positive for the world, particularly now that Biden on one side and China on the other have agreed on some of these main projects, particularly in terms of sustainability.
Thank you, Gabriele, for mentioning the important role of insurance in filling the protection gaps, in investing in the real economy, in capitalizing on new technological developments. I think this is extremely also for mentioning the partnership approach. I mean, there is a lot of talk now, the return of the state. There is also the return of the private industry. I think what we want is really a new partnership mode for the market, the private sector, and the public policy to work together to address it, like they did in relation to the vaccines, for instance. The important emerging problems and actual problems we experience. Unfortunately, we have exhausted the time, but just a quick on this partnership. If in 1 minute you had to ask public policies, governments, what they can do and they should do to create an environment that would enable the insurance sector and in general the financial sector to play a more positive role, particularly in Eastern Europe.
Well, I mean, it's a question that concerns the insurance sector overall, of course, in Europe, in the Balkans, in Eastern Europe. Basically, what we need today, I mean, of course, I see that as a moment, is that particularly at the European level, so in Brussels, they take care of two main things. One is be clear on what the sustainability program is in terms of green products, taxonomy. We have to be clear, comparable with the rest of the world. We have to know when we talk about sustainable projects, sustainable programs, where we have to put a lot of money. We need to have all the same understanding. Real understanding, correct understanding. We don't want to see and to hear anymore the word greenwashing. I mean, this is a fake. This is something that has to come out of our pictures, but it's still a problem around. And the second, we need that, the regulators, I said this several times in Brussels, the regulators have to take in consideration in this review of Solvency II, which is the main, rule book for the insurances, that if they want to receive part of the money that I indicated before towards long-term sustainable projects, innovative projects, they have also to give to this particular view in terms of long-term investment. Rules are different from the short-term and variable and volatile investments that banks can make. I mean, the insurers are other animals, are different animals. They have a very long-term view. We have very long-term liabilities, so we can confront, the investment expectations of the world, of Europe in particular, of the sustainability project in particular, with a totally different set of rules than what we have still today. This will allow us, the project that had the dimension of hundreds of billions of euros a month and trillions over years. I mean, this cannot be confronted by public institutions alone. They certainly cannot be confronted by private people alone, but private and public, particularly with this fund I mentioned before. Let's take the insurers, the first layer, reinsurers, the second layer, private investors also in the financial markets, the third layer, and governments and the public institutions, the fourth layer. All together, we will be able to confront the needs of our populations and of our clients and of our economies in a very efficient way.
Thank you very much, Gabriele. I think we've come to the end of our conversation. Thank you for your messages, well taken, and definitely food for thought for the proceedings of our forum. Thank you also for your vision, for your leadership. It was a privilege to have you here in Trieste to start our forum. And I think now we have to engage in the roundtable that will follow. And so thank you. I know that you have other commitments, so you will have to go. But we have now a very prestigious panel of speakers. I will introduce them one by one as they speak. and I would like to follow the order of the program to discuss, I think, the geopolitical and business context of the post-COVID recovery. I will start from Roberto Antonione, he's the Secretary General of the Central European Initiative. I think he's one of the oldest after the end of the Cold War organization based in Trieste, and he's a medical doctor turned policymaker, has had important role in parliament, but also in local politics and in CEI reforms. So welcome, Roberto. I will give you the floor, and I will start by asking you a blunt question, because I think this is a question that is in the back of everybody's mind, but nobody dare to ask. When Eastern European countries, particularly the Western Balkans, will access the EU, is it possible to think of a date? Is this concrete? Is this something that is in the cards, or is it something that we keep talking about, making rhetoric out of this? Because I think on this particularly, you heard the young generations. They expect they expect to see governments moving, taking bold decisions. And the essence, I think, the quintessence of your organization is to prepare these countries for accession. But so, when is accession coming? Roberto, you are mute. You are mute.
Sorry. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me
go
now?
ahead.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Good morning. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. This is a very interesting forum. Your question is absolutely, how can I say, impossible to answer. I can say that I agree. I totally agree. The vision, the political positive vision of Gabriele, of the president of Generali, and as you said, the process started a long time ago in 2003 with the Salonico Council, in which all the countries, all the European countries, decide to open the door to all the Balkan region. But the process now is not exactly what we hoped the process could be, and we hope in the future we can have an improvement, an acceleration, for the reason that you said and Gabriele said and many other speakers said. But it doesn't depend only on the countries. I think we have to work on the public opinion, because we know that all the political process depends on the public opinion that are able to influence the policymakers. And if we think of the past, for example, during the enlargement of 2004, the biggest enlargement of the European Union, at that time, all the European people was in favor. And so it was easy for the policymaker to continue to enlarge it and to have all the positive support of people. Now the process is a slow process for what they call European fatigue, and this depends on the political public opinion. So we have to work also in this context. But about the topic that we are here to discuss today, let me, of course, express my appreciation for the topic that the organizers have chosen. And in this regard, let me first of all add my compliments to young panelists that this morning have opened our forum. For me, it's a pleasure to be here to discuss these topics with prestigious speakers with complementary backgrounds and competencies. I think we all agree that we cannot look at the COVID-19 pandemic as something that will pass over quickly. From where we stand now, we need to plan and prepare for short, medium, and long term. Exchanging knowledge and experiences on economy and social challenges is particularly important nowadays, and needs active international engagement and mobilization. We at the Central European Initiative, CEI, are very much dedicated to addressing the crisis through a coordinated multilateral approach, which is our core business. In this regard, let me refer to our recent cooperation with the European Investment Bank and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. Together with these strategic players, we organized two virtual events in March, April this year. First, a chief economic forum that carried out a comprehensive macroeconomic review of the current situation in CI water region, which, as you know, encompasses 17 member states in Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe. Then we convened a larger forum of regional investors and associations, which has attended inter alia by some of the speakers present today, such as Franco Del Neri and Pierluigi Gaggi. The main lesson we can draw from the valuable inputs collected during these international and multilateral stakeholders discussions is a general consensus on the historic opportunity we are all facing to define a more sustainable and inclusive model of economic development. Yet only by working together can we try to provide efficient responses to the long-term recovery efforts and thus curb the dramatic impacts posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Our common agenda must focus on productivity and competitiveness, on making our economies greener and more digital, with the goal to make our region more innovative, more resilient, and more sustainable. Nevertheless, I shall remark that while all the CI countries have gone into recession after the outbreak of the pandemic, they had been suffering from prevision, unstable, and unsustainable growth. Indeed, many economies were experiencing slow productivity growth, and unequal opportunities were present. Against this backdrop, recovery represents an opportunity to build resilience and help establish a new growth model built on 4 pillars. The first one, innovation. The second one, digital technologies. The third one, climate change mitigation. And the last one, skills, labor, and social inclusion. To reach this ambitious goal, we cannot disregard the current geopolitical context in Central Europe, as well as along Europe's southeastern and eastern borders. If we look at these areas, we can identify significant geopolitical challenges that the pandemic has somehow exacerbated. First, the need to reinvigorate the European integration process to address the resurgence of nationalism within the EU, which was particularly evident during the first wave of the pandemic in the first months of 2020. This represents a weakness, not only in terms of internal cohesion, but the EU, but also if we consider its international projection both on the global scene and on its immediate neighborhood. I'm referring in particular to the Western Balkans, where the slow pace of EU enlargement is opening its doors to competing players such as China, Russia, and Turkey, as exactly what Galateri Gianola said in his speech. The post-COVID recovery in Balkans need to be far more convincing that it was with the initial European response to the pandemic last year. To meet this objective, I believe a large alliance to support the action of the EU in the Western Balkans shall be mobilized, also ensuring better communication of the policies, tools, and funds that the EU is targeting towards the region. Advocacy for fostering the EU accession process is urgent not only in the Balkans themselves, but also in those EU members where the phenomenon called enlargement fatigue is particularly evident. Disinformation campaigns targeting the Balkans are to be countered, as they represent a dangerous threat to the consolidation of the democracy institution of these countries. Major effort to strengthen their civil society and specific action addressing the young generation are, in my opinion, urgent measures now more than ever. Youth affairs represents one of the priorities of the Central European Initiative. Therefore, I'm glad to acknowledge that this event was opened with a Youth Forum for the Future of Western Europe. In addition to Central Europe and Western Balkans, a third area of geopolitical concern is included in our membership. I'm referring to the Eastern neighborhood. The recent dramatic events in Belarus and the low-intensive war ongoing in Ukraine, eastern regions are regrettably under our eyes. At the same time, these circumstances are balanced by the new pro-European impetus occurring in Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine. Last 17 May, the three countries signed an agreement to reinforce trilateral cooperation, which formalizes their willingness to work together towards a more ambitious European integration. While the EU perspective of these countries are certainly far, the inception of the associated trio has, in my opinion, a strong political meaning, at least in symbolic terms. Dear colleagues, considering the challenges of the post-COVID recovery, as well as the geopolitical context that I have briefly outlined, I believe efforts should be made to define well-framed policies, including all relevant stakeholders and actors, ranging from ministries, international organizations, and financial institutions. Regional organizations such as CI can also be helpful for specifically by providing solid ground for diminishing the negative impacts created by the pandemic and for finding common solutions to challenges that know no borders. Multilateralism is and will be key to ensure convergence and harmonic development of this broad portion of Europe. A lot of work is waiting yet. I am confident we can overcome this crisis, rebuild our economies, and transform our region into a prosperous place. Thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward to an inspiring discussion.
Thank you very much, Roberto. I think I now turn the floor to Richard Middleton. He is the Managing Director of AFME, the Association of Financial Markets in Europe, a very important association of our sector. Richard is based in Frankfurt. He is an expert of regulation and compliance, and obviously is an expert of financial markets. Also, he has had a prestigious career working in Bear Stearns, GE. Actually, he started from Oxford. He's a graduate of Oxford, and he's an applied mathematician. And I think it's interesting that you have an applied mathematician expert on machine learning, if I'm not wrong, Richard. So I think to you, the same question that I have asked others, how do you see capital markets supporting the recovery? What role do they play in the recovery that is underway? Richard.
Well, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Can I just
go ahead. We hear you.
Great.
Yes, we hear you.
Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction and the invitation. And indeed, yes, I enjoyed at the start of my career researching into machine learning when maybe not too many people were doing it, and all of a sudden it seems to be very popular now. Maybe just in my remarks, and I will keep them quite short because I know we're close on time. I just maybe briefly cover 4 short questions about the recovery in capital markets. So the first one is, what is the scale of the funding challenge? The next one is, what are the sources of equity funding available? The next one is, what are the key issues for different types of companies looking to raise finance? And the last one is, how can the upcoming reviews of markets regulation help with that process? So Well, as we know, the COVID situation has prompted an unprecedented scale of public measures to help businesses, and that's been really crucial. But the challenge is going to be to repair the equity base of many companies. So in other words, we need to move beyond the bridge finance in the form of debt to instead focus on longer term economic repair and recovery. So debt has provided kind of a rescue, but its equity recapitalization is going to be needed to accelerate the recovery, because that will enable companies to invest for the long term, as we were hearing earlier. Now, listed markets have been able to access the markets reasonably well, I think, but for unlisted mid-caps and SMEs, other solutions are needed. And AFME and PwC published a report in January to provide some ideas on recapitalizing companies. And that report begins by noting that the scale of the recapitalization could be very significant. And it looks at other studies and then estimates that the total losses to the equity base, and this is within the EU, is likely to be around 1 trillion euros. And that brings me to the second question, which is, what are the sources of equity funding available? Well, in terms of private sector sources of traditional or common equity, you can go to the listed markets or the private equity markets. And a few numbers, in 2020, EU companies raised about 77 billion on the listed markets and 16 billion on the private equity sector, and also raised some hybrid funding, that is with some equity-like features, of 57. So if you add those numbers up, you get to about 150 billion. And then what about the public sector? As we've heard earlier, Next Generation EU, that's clearly very important. Some of that financing may come through the form of equity. For example, part of that fund is the Recovery and Resilience Facility granted to member states. And to some extent, that might get used for equity investments. We also have other funds as well. For example, the Invest EU fund, 26 billion, which then can be further leveraged, and the 25 billion from the European Investment Bank and their Pan-European Guarantee Fund. So there's lots of sources, and if you add those up, the private sector sources and the public sector sources, and make some assumptions about how much different funds are leveraged, etc., then the report estimates that the equity available will be sort of somewhere between about 400 and 550 billion in total. So that clearly represents a shortfall compared with the estimated scale of the funding challenge. So now I'm up to the third question, which is, what are the key issues for different types of issuers in the markets? As I said, large companies have generally been able to access equity finance, for example, through secondary issuances. And there are many reasons for this, but maybe just a couple of aspects of the market structure to comment on. The first one is competition. So investors on the markets and traders can choose between a number of different trading modalities. And what that means is they can lower their cost of trading, and they can maximize their potential returns. And I'll say a little bit more about that when we talk about the fourth question on regulation. And then the second aspect is liquidity. So this is important for investors, clearly, but it's also important for the issuers in the primary market. And that connection is really quite simple. Investors might hesitate to provide finance to issuers on the primary market if they're not confident that they can realize their investment at a later date. So what I'm emphasizing there is that if you build competitive and liquid secondary markets, that goes hand in hand with having well-developed primary markets as well, and can support the recapitalization of Europe's economy. But what about mid-sized companies and SMEs, which of course are the vast majority of businesses? The report finds that many mid-sized companies and SMEs don't want to give up control of their business, which of course they might do if they issued common equity. and they don't want to dilute their voting rights, so they want to stay in control, but they are willing to distribute a share of their profits to investors. So it's therefore worth thinking about whether some kind of hybrid instrument which meets all their requirements might be a useful source of equity finance. And the report makes a number of suggestions, including exploring the development of a new sort of EU-wide instrument designed specifically for non-financial companies and SMEs. And ideally, this could be developed to comply with ESG investment objectives as well, to attract maximum investor interest and support the green recovery. That brings me to the last question. The fourth question to address is what about the role of EU markets regulation? And you may be aware that a key part of the EU regulatory framework is the Markets in Financial Instruments Directive and Regulation, which is due to be reviewed towards the end of this year. And that will be very important in promoting diverse and well-regulated EU markets, which support the needs of investors and consumers. And in our view, there are two principles which should guide the upcoming review. First, it should focus on the outcomes for the investors and the issuers. So although it's all about the markets, the review should not be focusing on banks or exchanges, but more on savers, pensioners and issuers to maximize returns and reduce financing costs respectively. And secondly, it should be evidence-based. In other words, it should be anchored on a thorough impact assessment of the benefits and costs. This may sound like a very obvious point, but a thorough impact assessment is not an easy task for some of these regulations, because there's a huge amount of very complex data to analyze. And indeed, a lot of debate on how to do that. For example, a very live debate at the moment, when you analyze trading data, we think that from the point of view of the investor, it's important to identify the trades which contribute to the price formation and those trades that don't. And if we do that, we can get a more accurate picture of where those respective types of trades are taking place. And this links back to my earlier point about trading modalities and competition. If this is a topic of, rather technical, but if this is a topic of interest, we published a report just last week about it with the economic consulting firm Oxera. And the headline in the report really is that it estimates that when analyzing those trades that contribute to price formation, most of the trading, a little bit more than 80%, is taking place on the exchanges and multilateral trading facilities, and the rest, just under 20%, taking place either over the counter or through what are called systematic internalizers. We hope that our analysis will be a useful source of evidence to support the impact assessment which the European Commission will need to carry out. We also hope that it will help to avoid any changes which might inadvertently reduce competition in the market. So I think I should come to a close there, because my stopwatch says just over 8 minutes. So I will close there.
Thank you very much, Richard. And indeed, as you said, the present phase we are living in, moving on from the emergency phase into the recovery, this question of the shift from debt to equity is really of paramount importance. And it applies, as you said, well, definitely to the small and medium enterprise sector, the issue of recapitalization, but I think it applies to 360 degrees. It would apply also to the infrastructure sector. It would apply to the welfare system, things of the health sector, how important it is to have a robust private sector able to invest in research, vaccine research, therapy research. So I think it's the issues that you mentioned, including the regulatory aspects that make this possible, is central to our discussion. And now let's move on to Enzo Quattrociocche. Enzo is the Secretary General of the EBRD, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. It's an important role in a very important institution EBRD is the multilateral development bank for the whole pan-European region. And I think Galateri was mentioning the need to, when we talk of Europe, to have a broad mind, to think not only of the European Union, but also the wider European context. And I think definitely EBRD, based in London, has that kind of approach. So I think now Enzo has had a distinguished career in the Italian Treasury, educated in where I also graduated at the University of Rome, but then also in the UK. He spent time at the IMF, so I think definitely he has a lot of experience to tell us what the EBRD is doing or is thinking about the support that we need to provide for the recovery. And so you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Paolo, and good morning, everybody. I have been to this forum 4 years in a row, and I always look forward to it. So thank you very much for having me once again. I would like to spend a couple of minutes to comment about the change in mindset that seems to be happening in Europe. We are slowly just beginning to reemerge from over 15 months of prolonged national lockdowns, a health emergency unparalleled in modern times, and a second global economic crisis in just over 10 years. Many things remain uncertain, but what is quite clear is that the economic ramifications brought on by the coronavirus crisis have reinvigorated state intervention in both Europe and elsewhere, with potentially far-reaching consequences. National governments and the European Union have begun to spend their way out of this crisis in a manner that was inconceivable 2 years ago. This change in mindset could lead to a wider rethink of Europe's political economy, and this may be no bad thing. While comparisons have been made between the economic crisis we are currently facing and the financial crisis of 2008, the two crises were, of course, very different in both their genesis and systemic impact. After the crash a decade ago, there was no paradigm shift in political thinking in Europe. Austerity and structural reforms followed, but the traditional thinking that markets should rule remained the same. Many people, policymakers and citizens alike, are now questioning this very orthodoxy. Ordinary people have witnessed European governments unleashing unprecedented fiscal and monetary interventions, and this is fundamentally changing how they view the role of the state. Going forward, people may expect similar government interventions to continue well beyond the initial pandemic response. While some would welcome this, the ramifications of such a course need to be considered. Is such an expectation unrealistic? Is it too interventionist? How will it be ultimately paid for? Perhaps even more important to remember in this context is that while many of these interventions have been agreed in principle between the EU and national governments, both within and neighboring the Union, not all member states started on the same foot entering the pandemic, nor were they all affected by it in the same way. And recognizing the particularities of individual economies while also promoting regional harmonization is something that we at the EBRD pride ourselves on. As a multilateral development bank with a distinct private sector mandate, the EBRD is committed to assisting the countries in which we work to move toward market-based economies. We recognize that in exceptional circumstances such as this, there is a need for targeted state intervention. The Next Generation EU 750 billion euro fund, which will be financed by collective borrowing through the European Commission, is an excellent example of this. One important point that is somewhat missing from the debates, and something that I kept thinking about when reflecting on what I wanted to say today, was the view of youth. And it's very good of the FeBAF forum to have given voice to the youth at this forum today. The youth of today will be the ones shouldering the debt burden arising from this crisis for many years to come. Yet their voices are distinctly missing from conversations surrounding the recovery. The 2008 crisis destroyed opportunities for young people for over a decade. Now that same generation and those behind it are facing another unprecedented crisis for the second time in their short lives. Between February and September 2020, youth unemployment increased in Europe to 17%, and 3 months into the pandemic, 1/3 of employees aged 18-24, excluding students, lost their jobs or were furloughed. This is largely attributed to the fact that the industries most affected by the pandemic and the resultant government-mandated lockdowns were those in which a high proportion of young people worked. Yet nobody's really listening to what today's youth have to say about recovering from this crisis. Things that matter most to the young: tackling climate change, affordable housing, livable cities, good healthcare, relief from student debts, to name a few, need to form the basis of the recovery. Otherwise, we are at risk of another lost generation. Finally, I don't think any conversation regarding building back from the coronavirus pandemic is complete without reference to doing so sustainably. I don't think this point can be overstated. As a bank that aims to be fully Paris aligned by the end of 2022 and to invest in a majority of green projects by 2025, the EBRD is committed to building back better from this crisis. There is a political window of opportunity to leverage the disruption brought by these unprecedented times to bring about innovation and develop better sustainable practices. If COVID has taught us one thing, it is that we cannot sit idly by. We must harness this opportunity to move to a greener path. The International Energy Agency published on 18 May its long-awaited roadmap for a global energy sector that meets net zero emissions by 2050. The key message of the report is that this transformation is unprecedented in its scale and speed, but it is possible. The technologies and policies needed to achieve the 2030 emissions goal are all available now, and it can be done while preserving, indeed enhancing, prosperity. A surge in clean energy investment creates 14 million new jobs and adds 4% to global GDP in 2030, compared to business as usual. It also brings electricity to the nearly 800 million people who currently lack access to it. And the reduction in air pollution avoids 2 million premature deaths annually by 2050. The IEA analysis confirms the EBRD's strategic directions. One of its key messages is that getting to net zero is a whole of economy effort, meaning that every sector requires investment and every economic actor will need to reshape its thinking. The analysis reinforces the vital importance of energy efficiency, the area where EBRD's green initiative first began, and confirms our decision not to invest anymore in upstream gas. To move to a greener path, however, we must do so in a uniform manner. The EU and other like-minded jurisdictions are already doing Trojan work to classify and define what green and sustainable means in the context of green finance. It is important that we find the right balance between incentivizing browner companies to transition to greener practices while protecting against greenwashing. It is a delicate needle to thread, as it is accepted that more granular definitions are required. But we want to avoid a binary choice between green and not green investments so that we do not end up leaving worthy projects out of the transition. Thankfully, there are myriad instruments being brought to market lately as the market innovates and adapts. We have use of proceeds instruments such as green, sustainable, and social bonds on the one hand. We have KPI-linked instruments such as sustainability-linked bonds, one of which EBRD has just invested in Greece. These instruments are extremely useful as they not only drive green projects, but they can strongly influence corporate strategy and behavior. It is now time to get to work, put words into action, and make Europe greener and more resilient. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Enzo. Thank you for mentioning the challenge of the transition, net zero transition, transition to resiliency, sustainability, and for highlighting the important role of the financial sector. In the end, it will be the financial sector, the working of capital markets, banks, insurance companies, that will enable the channeling of the resources away from declining sectors into the sectors of the future. Now I turn to Maya Mdiska Trendafilova. Last but not least, Maya, thank you for being with us. Maya works in Sarajevo at the Regional Cooperation Council, which is a very important institution of the region that works for integrating the different countries of the region from different aspects, different points of view. And she's responsible for this new project, a very ambitious project, the common market, for Eastern European common market. I think it's a very ambitious project, and well, obviously I will ask her the same question the other speakers, what are the initiatives that the Regional Cooperation Council is taking for the recovery. But let me start, just for the sake of discussion, with a provocative question, because obviously the focus is on the common market now. And now, is this common market, should we consider it as a stepping stone for preparing countries, to enable countries to access the European Union quicker and better, or is it a stumbling stone, something that will, when you have another big ambitious project on the way, that it becomes a condition, and then perhaps for somebody an excuse for delay and not moving forward. So, I mean, how do you see it from Sarajevo? Maya, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, to start off immediately with an answer on the provocative questions, definitely a stepping stone. This is the intention, and that is why the common regional market is also based on the EU rules and standards. So it is indeed used as a stepping stone and never instead of. So then thank you very much for, of course, extending the invitation to the Regional Cooperation Council. It is my pleasure to address you on behalf of RCC and to outline this vision for regional economic integration, both within the Western Balkans, but also with the EU, that we in RCC pursue, which actually grows in importance in this new geopolitical and economic context. So the vision that we have as a region, and actually confirmed at the highest political level of the Western Balkans leaders, is actually the attainment, as you said, of a common regional market along the four freedoms, which is based on EU rules and standards, so that it is indeed a stepping stone to earlier integration in the EU single market, so dispelling any fears of instead of processes of EU integration that from time to time, of course, surface in the discourse. So that's why it is very important, especially at such a geopolitics panel, to stress the complementarity and this mutually reinforcing nature of the common regional market with the EU integration processes, as it will pave the way for deeper economic integration with the EU single market. So what we in RCC, but also in the region, believe is that in this rather sadly stalled enlargement context, our region can much more aggressively tap into the potentials of the new enlargement methodology and also the avenues that are identified in the economic and investment plan for enhanced economic integration in the EU, even ahead of the political accession. For us, this is crucial because this is where the economic and the transformational potentials lie on that side, on the side of the EU, because they are incomparably bigger than the transformation potentials that can be unlocked only through regional economic integrations. So now, if you allow me, in the next few minutes, I will give you a couple of examples of the centrality of these EU models and standards, and the importance of integrating our region, so-called phasing in the EU policies, programs, and market as part of the accession process. So to start off, the objective, for instance, of cutting roaming costs between our region and the EU, once we have successfully abolished the roaming costs in the region through an EU model-based regional agreement that we in RCC had the pleasure to broker. So now, from the perspective of a roaming-free region, we'll continue to work with our European partners until our citizens are able to roam without additional cost in the EU, as should the EU citizens in the region. A second important example concerns the extension to the EU of all the mutual recognition arrangements that we are doing, of various certificates, licenses, testing results, professional qualifications. So the moment we attain this in the region based on EU models, we want to unlock the recognition with the EU. Or thirdly, extending the very successful Green Lanes initiative that we had within the region, which actually enabled that there is no shortage of all the essential goods and medicine in the most of precarious context in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic. The idea is that now this is extended to the EU because we know where the queues lie. And we know that it is the EU member states border crossing points that actually sustain around 70% of our trade flows. So given today's audience actually at the forum, another important example also includes the reduction of payment transaction costs in the region. So we as a region are working to cut the payment transaction costs within the region. But of course, we expect that the second stage is joining the single European payment area due to the benefits it generates in terms of efficient exchanges, but also market integration. So if I can wrap up these examples, our aim, our hope is that this EU element that is unlocked after the region harmonizes regionally based on EU models is much more prominent. And this will not only bring a very important boost to economic, of course, performance and investments, but this for us is the very important political signal that the future of our region is with the EU. So now, in a few words, allow me also to walk you through some of the concrete reform agendas that stem from the action plan adopted last year that are relevant for today's forum. The first one, for instance, concerns trade integration, including elements of establishing regional e-commerce markets, facilitating customs clearance of parcels, eliminating geo-blocking, but also improving the dispute resolution mechanism, risk management in our trade regimes, and as well as systematic exchange of data of all agencies which are involved in the clearance of goods. The second important strand that we do concerns investment reforms, actually aligning our investment policies with the EU standards and best practices, and promoting the region as a unique investment destination to the foreign investors. And here we focus on policy reforms. For instance, we brokered for the first time regional standards for negotiating international investment agreements, so new generation of international investment agreements. We are assisting the region in boosting transparency on investment incentives. We will start a process on regional criteria for FDI screening, inspired by the EU process, etc. Together with the Chamber Investment Forum, we also work, as I said, on joint investment promotion and attracting investment leads in promising value chains. We also work in the area of financial markets, which is very relevant for today, focusing on diversifying and deepening financial markets, cutting the cross-border costs of payments, but also strengthening interoperability among Western Balkans, deepening the capital markets through exploring possible EU-style single regimes. So actually in the post-COVID context, our region is particularly well positioned for these nearshoring alternatives, for especially EU-based investors that are looking to adopt a more balanced distribution and diversification of supply sources, and of course, develop the means of production which are closer to the consumers. This should not be, of course, an ideal portrayal of the situation. Of course, building the common regional market needs not only investment, but serious critical reforms to help unlock the full potentials of green and investment development. So if I can sum up, the potential is there, actually it's here in our region, but so is the need for reforms and much more work ahead. But such disruptive context can be particularly good for changing gears from laggards to leaders, or at least directing ourselves in that direction. Of course, RCC has a wide portfolio. As part of the wider common regional market agenda, we support the digital transformation of the region, the green transformation of the region, and with this COVID-induced digital leap that happened, which will of course not subdue after the pandemic, this is really a prime time for accelerating reforms on digital transformation, broadband connectivity, improving resilience, and we in RCC support this. We even have an annual digital summit, high-level leaders forum, which for the first time will talk a lot on digital economy, because if there is something that the COVID crisis showed us is that whoever invested in e-commerce, automation, etc., of course, got the returns compared to the digital laggards. We also do another enabling reforms, such as in the important freedom of movement agendas. So I'm closing here just to say that the pandemic underscored the need and potentials for regional cooperation and solidarity, and this regional dimension grew in importance. And actually the citizens and the businesses of our region hold regional cooperation in high regard. And actually just to throw a couple of numbers to spice up our discussions, even though I know that we are nearing the end. 77% of our citizens believe that regional cooperation contributes to better political, economic, and security situation in the home, and 69% of the businesses directly attribute improved regional cooperation to the increased quality of the businesses. So actually it is these voices and these pulses that chart our way forward and oblige us to work better and together. Of course, we have a long way ahead, challenging road ahead in terms of building back not just better, broader, smarter, more inclusive, greener. And we in RCC continue to be a committed partner, and we are actually led by this vision of cooperation and cooperation and togetherness, rather than competition and the races to the bottom, which were characteristic for the initial stages of the cooperation. So thank you very much for this opportunity to outline the common regional market agenda that we in RCC support. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you very much indeed. I think it's very important. The work that you're doing is very interesting. And I want to use this opportunity really to pay a tribute to you and to all the women and men working in Sarajevo, because I think they are showing how moving onwards with practical steps to abolish obstacles, eliminate fragmentation, you can achieve a lot. And I think I fully agree, certainly from the business perspective, that this is perceived as a very positive work. I mean, particularly as you said, on the backdrop of the enlargement of the stalling of the enlargement process that we are living in. I mean, I must say I'm still have difficulties in coming to terms with this political reality that we have an enlargement process that is stalled, because I do believe that it would be in the interest of everybody to move it onwards, and certainly the responsibility of politicians, policymakers, to move on and for something that has worked for other countries. I think it should also work, and certainly would work also for the Western Balkans and Eastern Europe more broadly. I think time is up, unfortunately. We didn't have time to go more in depth, and I'm sure we have not exhausted the complexity of the issues, but I mean, we were not expecting to do that. I mean, we wanted just simply to throw on the table topics and ideas and food for thought, and I think we will have time now in the following session to go more in depth. And with that, I turn it now over to you, Studio in Rome. Thank you very much to the speakers, the excellent speakers, for all their very important and valuable contributions. Over to you.
Thank you, Paolo. Thank you to all the panelists. I have to inform that we need now a 2 minutes technical break. So stay with us. We'll come back to you in 2 minutes. Be patient, please.